Hello, everyone, and welcome back. It's been a while.
Been a few years.
For some people, this might be the first time you're jumping in. I don't know if we have any of our returning listeners or not. So I guess let's introduce ourselves. My name is David.
I'm Dylan.
And if you do know us, it's probably because several years ago we did an Evangelion podcast called You Cannot Rewatch. It was audio only, same as we're doing today. We talked about doing video, but it's more complicated. And I mean, technically, this is sort of the last episode of our podcast, even though it's been years. So I guess we should keep it the same format. If you did not listen to that podcast, don't worry. It's not like you need to watch this video. If you're just here for some thoughts on the new Evangelion movie, which I guess we should have mentioned, that's what we're talking about today. But I'm sure the title already said that. We're going to talk about the new movie and share our thoughts, discuss a little bit about it. It's kind of what we did if you did listen to our podcast. But yeah, anything else before we start jumping into it?
No, let's get into it.
All right, so I thought we would first, we kind of got our intro out of the way there. I thought we'd first talk a little bit about like our expectations for this going into it, since it's been a while since we've done our podcast.
Sure.
Also, really quick, I do want to say, this is only available on YouTube, which I apologize if you're one of our old podcast listeners and you wanted this on iTunes or something. It's complicated to get it on there, mostly because I don't have the login for a lot of that stuff anymore. So it's only going to be available on YouTube. I apologize for that. But on YouTube, I'm going to make sure to put chapters in the video. So if you're at least watching on PC, I don't know if you can do that on mobile, but you can look in the video, hover around. If you want to skip us talking about our intro and all that and our expectations, if you just want to get us right into the plot, you can do that. If you want to hear just our opinions about the movie, you can do that. So yeah, whatever you want to listen to. We try to make it easier for you here. So we both obviously like Evangelion a lot. Just in case, some people might be listening to this who didn't listen to our podcast. We're huge fans, which is why we did a podcast in the first place. I think that podcast even probably made us even bigger fans. We had already seen it several times before we did that. With the rebuilds, we both really liked them a lot as well. I'm speaking for both of us, but I know we've talked about them. Even 3, I know, is kind of divisive to a lot of fans, but I think you really like 3, right?
Yeah.
Did you rewatch that before the new movie?
I actually did not rewatch it because you told me the recap was in the beginning, so I figured. Although I did pause thrice to then quickly read a Wikipedia recap because I feel like I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah, I kind of wish I had taken some more time to rewatch some stuff, but I've been very busy, and I wanted to rewatch this a second time, 3+1, but yeah, just didn't have time. Anyways,
I mainly wanted to read a quick synopsis of that because I'd kind of forgotten how that one ended.
Right.
Like, I remember like the end plot points, but I forgot how like Rei and Asuka and Shinji ended up together and a thing. I was like, wait a minute, what happened? I forgot how this part happened.
Yeah.
So real quickly, I had to read that up.
But I would say for both of us going into this new one, we were both super excited. Certainly been waiting for this for a very long time. I remember even when we started our podcast, which was like, did we start that in like 2014?
It might have even been earlier than that. Maybe 2013. Yeah, maybe that was it. Yeah.
But I remember when we started that podcast, because I think we did it bi-weekly, and then we took big breaks between the series, End of Eva, and then each rebuild movie. And it was like, I remember talking about like, by the time we're getting to it, 4 will probably be out.
Right. Yeah.
Within the reasonable amount of time with our podcast. Like, we might have to wait a little bit, but then our podcast ended like 4 years ago.
Sure.
I say ended, technically we've been waiting for this to do our final episode. But yeah, that's a lot of time for anticipation.
So how were your expectations coming into this one after so much time?
It's almost that so much time went by that it's not like I wasn't still excited, but it was almost just like, oh yeah, that'll come out.
I'm in the same way where like I believe after watching 3, especially after like 3.33 finally got released on Blu-ray.
Right.
I like couldn't wait. I had so many fan theories in my head and I was hoping they would come true.
Yeah.
And like by the time this came out, it was kind of just like, it's been so much time. There's almost no way Ono is just like having the same mindset he has after writing 3.
Yeah.
So I was just happy it even came out, period.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it is weird though. I mean, it is kind of what happened, I guess, somewhat with 3. But where, just so much time went on that it was like, it's hard to stay excited for that long. Then. Yeah. It's not that I wasn't still excited to see it. I definitely was. But it was kind of just like, I don't know. Like, I wish I had been a little bit more hyped. I
mean, to me, it's just still, even though I knew it was coming out soon, like, every time I kept hearing, like, oh, it's this weekend, I was like, oh, wow, this feels so sudden. And then all of a sudden... Boom,
that's why I kept being like, wow. I'm going to rewatch all the rebuilds at least before this. And then like it snuck up and I was like, oh, no, I guess I'm not.
Yeah.
I guess I want to go ahead and see it so that I can get back on the internet and stop avoiding spoilers.
Yeah, exactly. I guess it's also different, dude, because like when 3 came out, there's a whole theater run planned. I mean, like all got canceled.
Right.
But, I feel like there's more fanfare. There's just like, here it is.
Yeah, here it is. Which, I mean, I do appreciate, fuck Jeff Bezos, but I appreciate that Amazon got the rights for this.
Yeah.
Redid the dubs, like put it out in... subtitle wise, put it out in like 40 different languages or something crazy like that.
I was so shocked when I heard that because I knew it was coming out in Japan, but I already set my expectation to be like, oh, well, I'm still going to wait probably another 3 years before it finally comes dubbed to the US based off of how 3.3 went and all that jazz. So I was like, it's going to be forever. So I'm not upset that it happened so quickly. It just feels like I just didn't have time to get myself prepared or hyped for it because it just which is great. I mean, I'd rather have it come quicker than later. So
definitely. Fuck, I was going to say something else. I totally lost my train of thought there. Oh, I was going to say in terms of like being able to get back on the internet. Have you done any have you looked at stuff since you watched it or like read anything about it?
Not really. The only thing I looked up would be like general reviews. Like I didn't read really any of the reviews. I was just curious what the general like consensus was. Yeah. So like the Rotten Tomato score, the Metacritic score, how people typically felt about.
I haven't even looked at any of that.
I was just curious what that was.
I wanted to kind of wait till we talked about it.
There really isn't much out there.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's why I didn't even. When I got back on Twitter, I was like, oh, there's gonna be so many spoilers, and then I was like, oh, I guess I didn't need to stay off of this.
I mean, even when you try and Google it, it pops up 3.3's Rotten Tomatoes score instead of Thrice. You have to like really go in to get Thrice. And even if you do look at Thrice, I think it's currently only based off of like 5 or 4 or so reviews. So like,
I guess that makes sense.
Not a lot out there quite yet.
Well, I don't even know with not to get off too much of a tangent. I don't know with a site like Rotten Tomatoes, do they do global movie reviews? Like if a Japan newspaper reviewed it, would that be on Rotten Tomatoes?
I guess
I don't know. Actually,
I don't think so. Not that I would.
So maybe it's only American reviews. That's why there's so few. Because surely there's a lot of Japanese reviews.
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so.
Newspapers and websites there. But yeah, I thought about because I think with this is a little bit different. Actually, this is the first time we are reacting or discussing an Evangelion movie right after it came out.
Yeah.
Like every other one, I mean, we did a rewatch podcast. So if you didn't listen to that, we had already seen the show multiple times, 3 movies multiple times, and it was us going back through, picking up a lot of details. So I guess apologies for some people that are listening to this. It's probably not going to be quite as thorough in some of the plot and minutia aspects because we haven't had as long to sit on this and be able to see a million articles about it and get every little detail. A lot of it's still very fresh, so we have that going for us. But it's also like this is a dense fucking movie.
Because I had seen 3.0 when it came out because I was lucky enough to see one of the original theater runs, and we did a podcast relatively quickly after it came out on release.
Right.
But by the time it came on release, the movie had technically been out for a while.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is still like fresh on everybody's account, more or less.
Yeah, definitely. Which is cool. I think that's an interesting note to end our last episode on. But I guess now, so how we're going to do this from this point on is first we're going to kind of just go through and just general thoughts, like what we thought about the movie, just in general. And I didn't say this already. This is totally full spoilers. Definitely don't listen to this if you have not seen this movie or have any interest in that kind of thing, because we're just going to talk about everything very openly, definitely starting from now on. I guess just in case if somebody is happening to listen to this and they're just curious, like, should I watch this movie? I mean, if you're an Evangelion fan, you probably already know the answer, but of course, it would be weird not to. But I guess just in case you're curious, what is the general consensus before spoilers? Do I need to watch this or should I watch this? I mean, if you've watched this far, why wouldn't you finish it anyways?
No reason.
So I guess you don't need us to tell you that regardless. But now, with that out of the way, we both recommend it, but with that out of the way, we're going to talk general thoughts, and then we'll dive and kind of deep dive and kind of go through the whole movie point by point. We'll kind of go through it a little bit quick because we don't want this to be the longest episode ever, and if we went through every single detail, this would be
forever,
10 hours. ideally it's not going to last that long for us here. But yeah, I guess just what did you think of the movie just overall?
Actually, I was gonna say, I don't want to say the word pleasantly surprised isn't an accurate point, because like it wasn't like I had low expectations, but I enjoyed it a lot, but not for why I thought I would enjoy it.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
There's a lot of things in here I wasn't expecting to be there, and I actually really enjoyed them, and I think I enjoy certain content and story plots more so now than I did maybe a couple years ago. And so, especially a lot of the beginning stuff, which we'll get into, I kind of really enjoyed that kind of stuff. And I feel like I got to see characters in a different kind of point. And I liked how everything didn't feel so, like, just dive right into it so quickly and so hard. It was kind of just nice having a little bit of slow burn kind of in the beginning.
Yeah,
I kind of really enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah, totally agree with that, especially in the beginning. Like you said, we'll get more into it, but yeah, I absolutely love, maybe not the very, very opening of this movie, that big action scene, but like all the stuff at Village 3 is incredible.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely want to, we'll probably spend a good amount of time talking about that section, which is going to be funny because plot-wise, like in terms of like the larger story and everything that happens, not a lot during that part, but I feel like that's the part I'm more interested in talking about, actually.
Yeah. I mean, that one definitely has some sort of consequence impact later for the story, for sure.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not to say it's not completely irrelevant, but it is, yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll get more into that when we do our plot breakdown. But in terms of some what you were saying about, like, it's definitely not what you expected, that's a tough thing because, like, I don't want to do the cliche thing of like I wasn't that surprised because I was expecting the unexpected.
Sure.
But I mean, especially after 3, the preview at the end of 2 and then going into what 3 actually was just like, which we both like 3 a lot, but it's very much like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah, I feel like the later part of the movie seemed more on brand of what I was expecting from Anno.
Yeah.
But I wasn't expecting so much mellow from certain things, and not so much just kind of like everybody's character kind of for way just being like kind of like go with the flow, sure, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like wasn't really expecting that. I was expecting, with Anno, he usually likes to have a bit more chaos, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
And especially in the beginning part, there like really isn't a lot of that.
Yeah, oh, definitely not. But yeah, I feel like at this point, especially because to me, I'm one of those people that's like, we had the original show. It ended in a way we love, especially with End of Eva. So like, just do whatever you want with these ones because we already have the complete story.
Yeah.
So I'm okay with like 3 just being like, okay, fuck it, we're not even on rails anymore. Like 1 and 2 are pretty on rails with rebooting the originals, and then 3's like, you know what, fuck it, this is totally its own thing.
Yeah.
So I'm all for that aspect of the rebuilds. That's what I want out of these. But we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But anyways, just my general thoughts. I was kind of disappointed with this.
Really?
I would say that I like this movie. I don't think I love this movie.
Interesting.
In ways that I was hoping that I would. It's kind of a mixed bag for me, and I feel like it's probably going to be a little while thinking about, exactly how I feel about it. This is one reason I even wanted to wait a few days before we even talked about it, because I figured there'd be a lot to process, which I was right about that. So I don't, in a year, I might feel even differently about it. It's definitely a movie with a lot to unpack, but I would say just at least gut reaction. There was a lot in this movie that I really did like, and then there was a lot in this movie that I did not like at all. And we'll go into that more as we go through the plot. But
to kind of like elaborate too, and like what things I would expect too is, I don't know if maybe this has been your thing, but I feel like before I would want things where like there's so much for me and there is for this one, sure, to like look deeper and unpack and all stuff like this one. But I feel like especially for most of the movie, at least like the first like hour and a half, if not more, it's a very straightforward, easy to understand plot. Yeah, which is just something you don't really expect from Anno. But like I don't know. I feel like a few years ago I would have hated that, but I kind of was okay with it. And this one was like, okay, this is you wrapping it up. You're kind of not in here throwing, subtext or hidden messages or none of that fan theories anymore. Just kind of like, here it is. This is what it is for you.
I think with that, we should probably just go ahead and jump in and do point by point. For the most part, like I said, for anybody listening, we aren't going to be able to be super elaborative about every single point in this movie because there's so much detail. We'll definitely hit the broad strokes and maybe in a few areas dive a little bit deeper. Sure. But for example, one that we'll probably kind of skip through pretty fast is the opening. So, people have already watched the movie, so I don't want to specifically like recount the exact plot, but this is when they are in Paris at whatever the Nerve HQ here was. I also, really quick before I get too deep into this, if you're listening to this and you're like a real stickler for like getting every single little thing right, I hate to break it to you, but we are not going to be doing that.
Especially for how quickly we turned around to record this.
Yeah. Granted, we probably should have rewatched the movies and brushed up a little bit more on our knowledge. But we didn't, so sorry. But I feel like there's going to be details we're going to miss and we're going to forget. Even to the point where I was like, did they already establish that there was a Nerve HQ in Paris? Is this like something that
I guess we've known there's been like some sort of global agreement, agreement. So I guess it just makes sense.
I know. At some point they did mention other HQs, and obviously even in the original show and in the rebuilds, there's the angel infected Ava, which is a different number, I believe, in the rebuilds than it was in the original show. In the original show, I believe it's 4. I don't even remember what it is in the rebuilds. That's another thing is like, boy, we're going to get which Ava is called what wrong because holy shit, how could you keep that straight?
It almost feels like a joke.
Yeah, I agree.
In of itself, I think it is almost a joke.
There's a lot of meta intentional stuff in this movie. And some of it worked, I think, in a lot of good ways for me. Some of it didn't. But jumping into the plot. So, we're in Paris attempting to recover like the sort of scattered remnants of Unit 2. It seems like it looked like they were all like piece by piece in separate buildings.
Oh, well, I the way I took that was it wasn't exactly Unit 2, but it was something that could be used to like repair Unit 2.
Yeah.
Like it was like some unit they were working on that never got finished.
That makes sense.
And so they're just using that stuff for spare parts. Which is why Unit 2 later on looks so...
Right. Raggedy.
Weird. Yeah, raggedy.
So they're here attacking, I say here, or I say they, it's Villa, I believe is how you say it. At least part of Villa, because Misato's not here at the time, but it's some of the crew is here trying to hack into this giant tower. And I forget what they call these towers in the movie, but...
Boy, me neither, I don't remember.
The giant tower. And basically these towers, when they are activated, keep away this sort of... I have this term written down here. Cororized?
Yeah,
so like the red's
taking over,
like the crystallized things, which is called cororized. Basically, when the towers are active, they are sort of a barrier or almost like a force field that keep anything in its radius alive, nature-y, and not, cororized. So they're trying to reactivate this tower to basically restore Paris, really just for their sake, because it's not like anybody's alive there, or probably going to move back there. They're doing it just to get the
supplies
and the stuff, they're attacked by Nerve, I guess. They're attacked by a ton of random ass Evangelion and other robotic-like things. This was one of the things in the movie that didn't super work for me. The idea that like Nerve just has like infinite, insane amounts of like, robots and machines and stuff. Like
that one to me just seems so confusing because as far as I know at this point, Nerve is just Fusuke and
so I guess they built all this when Zele was still active. Maybe.
Also, didn't know that's how that was pronounced.
Me neither. Yeah. I mean, we definitely have said Zele the whole time, which I believe. I mean, that's what they originally pronounced it as.
That's how it is in the original dub, I believe. Yeah.
So, the whole like. Because obviously in the original End of Ava, there's the mass-produced units, but still I think there's only, I believe, 13, and they do sort of come out of nowhere, but it's a small enough number that I'm like, oh, I can buy that there's 13 of these things. Yeah. This is like such insane numbers that it just felt like they had no weight to them.
Sure.
Like the original unit, mass-produced units, like felt dangerous and felt, like they could do harm. And this, they're just such... I mean, they literally even say like they're cannon fodder at one point. And it's like, well, then who cares?
Because these aren't like the unfinished Avas, like, attacking. Like these are supposed to be things they built. So it's just like, well, where do they all come from? How do you even mass produce these?
Yeah, that definitely is a part too. This is also really quick. I do want to address. I in terms of visuals for this movie, anything that is like the more like 2D traditional animated stuff I thought was so gorgeous. And anything that was CG I thought was so horrendous to look at.
I mean, I can point out specific scenes when we get to certain points, but yeah, there's the amount of different media forms of animation used here is so bizarre to me.
It is, which Evangelion's done that a little bit in the past, obviously, going back to like episodes 25 and 26 where you go to like hand-drawn for certain parts.
Yes.
And, even in End of Ava where it does cut to live action occasionally or like pieces of mail. So it's done that a little bit, but I always thought that they did that really well and effectively, and it always worked for me. In this movie, in particular with the CG stuff, granted, the rebuilds have had CG before, but in this movie, I found it so distracting and in times really hard to follow for me.
There's a specific scene I'll talk about when we get to it that I did not like at all.
Yeah. Which is such a bummer because, again, I think the more traditionally animated stuff is so gorgeous. I think that stuff, and we'll talk about this more when we get to Village 3 especially, just so incredible to look at. From the art design standpoint, from the visual standpoint, like even the way they move I say move the camera, it's obviously not a real camera, but the way they choose the shots and stage them is so gorgeous. It was such a bummer to me every time CG came back on because it basically was me saying like, okay, now I'm time to turn my brain off and not appreciate this because it sucks. And they use it a lot in this movie, which is such a shame. And even in this opening scene,
part of me wonders if just because Anno wanted to get this out real quickly, that might be faster to do some of that stuff than having people like hand draw some animation.
Or maybe it's just that for whatever reason he did want these insanely huge action set pieces.
I do think certain things are animated the way they are because he wants them to stand out from everything else. Yeah, which I get.
Anyways, I said we were going to go through this fast. Now we've talked about this opening for too long. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's plot-wise, I guess it's somewhat important to get Unit 2, but this is something that I thought was interesting. I guess they wanted to open with an action scene to, especially because you're about to go into a really slow section for a long time.
And you got to open up with Mari singing something.
I guess you do. But this is one of the things, there's so many times, especially looking between 2 and 3, where we just skip so much information. And I felt like watching this was like, I didn't need a scene of them getting a Unit 2, whatever. Like, if they just had it later, I wouldn't have been like, how'd they get that?
That's true. Like, you could come to
how many times do they just have something all of a sudden? Or, they're just like, I don't know, we just have this fucking thing.
Especially how it looks, you can just assume, they just, threw some stuff together.
Yeah, they piecemealed it together somehow. They found the remain. Like, it was one of those things that, like, why are we, when there's so much in this universe we have just completely skipped over, to focus on this felt like a weird thing. I get maybe to an extent, it's, again, just for pacing wise, it's like, get some action in there before the slow stuff, but I honestly would have much preferred if it just straight up opened with the village stuff.
I think if it would have opened with Shinji, Rei, and Asuka walking, like how we see that opening, I close Papa Village, that would have been perfectly fine.
But this is one of those things that was weird to me too, just about the general structure of the movie in terms of talking about like, well, typically in a movie you open with an action scene and then you go a little bit slow for a while and then you have your action scene. What I've always appreciated about most of Evangelion is that it doesn't feel a need to be like traditional movie structure or traditional show structure. The rebuilds have had that a little bit more, maybe just because they are in theaters.
I definitely think that these are meant to be consumed by the masses.
Right.
More so than the others.
But I felt like this one, I felt like they did a good balance of having that kind of somewhat popcorn entertainment with the other rebuilds, but still having the stuff that like I want on a deeper level. This one to me, not that it didn't have some of the deep stuff does, but like it crossed the line a little bit too much of like the almost like a Hollywood movie aspect of things, especially as we get into the explosive finale stuff. But we'll get there. Let's talk about Village 3. This stuff's incredible. I have nothing, like I definitely have a lot of stuff to complain about later. I have pretty much nothing to say negative about.
This is one of the scenes I'm talking about when it gave me something I wasn't expecting. And I don't think I would have hated it several years ago, but I think me being so excited to figure out answers, I wouldn't have appreciated this nice, slow burn.
Right.
But I actually, especially after having so many years of like getting into it and I didn't really rewatch it, I just really enjoyed kind of the nice, subtle, getting to know everybody again kind of phase.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
There was a part of me that was like, I kind of hope the whole movie's like this.
I kind of thought that too. And I was like, I would like to see these guys surviving here and see what happens. And like, it felt really Studio Ghibli. That's kind of thing. Like the way everybody looked, the character designs, especially I really got that when we start seeing like some of the older ladies in the village and the rising. It just felt so, the way they talk and interact just felt so Studio Ghibli-esque to me. I loved it.
I want to get through this somewhat quick because we have so much more to talk about. So I just want to go through and just name off things that I just love in this section. I already kind of talked about the art design here, but just a little bit more specifically, the greenery mixed with like the red corized backgrounds, the really weird floating like anti-gravity things that are outside.
Just this peaceful tranquility of this village and everybody's hopefulness and joy. While literally, like, in the horizon is, like, pure fucking nightmare terror shit. Yeah.
It's one of the coolest post-apocalyptic settings I've probably ever seen.
Oh, yeah.
Which, again, is, I think, part of why I wanted to just stay in this environment. Like, if somebody just made a JRPG or something that was just this, I would
That'd be
play
so cool.
the fuck out of it. Like, I want to explore, not me in real life, because it would be a nightmare, but I want to explore this world more. Right. Like, and I thought this was so cool to see in Evangelion because, technically speaking, all of Evangelion, because it's after Second Impact, is a post-apocalyptic series.
Yeah.
But you look at the original show, like, obviously things get worse, but they're still living in mega cities. They still go to restaurants and have grocery stores. I love that this is, like, the most actual apocalyptic we've seen.
Yes.
Where it's like a small community ragtag together. I love that we see, there's so many small details. I love that we see how they grow their food. We have like Toji as a doctor, but not because he's really a doctor, because he just kind of took on that role.
Yeah. Because that was my first time I was like, how do you go to middle school without just what just happened?
Right. But that's, there's so many small details. I love the little library that's like a train car.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
that was great.
You didn't need to do all of that, but it's the fact that they did. It's such a realized, lived-in community.
I think it was really... I think it laid so many things that you can kind of think about and surmise, especially when you know like there had been a 14-year gap and stuff like that. But like you don't really get to see what that meant for everybody else. Like in 3, they're kind of really making you try and think that like everybody's dead. If they don't live on this wonder ship, they're basically dead.
Oh, there's even the part when Shinji finds Toji's old jacket. Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, I can't wait to figure out the consequence of that. And I actually like, I never would expect this, but I thought it was kind of cool to be like, oh, I would assume these guys are dead.
Yeah.
I'm actually really thought it was cool that he's like, no, they're not dead.
Yeah.
They're living their own lives this thing. You get to see, what is it, Ida?
Yeah, Kensuke Ida.
Kensuke Ida, and then Toji.
The class rep.
I also...
together as a couple. And
I thought it was so funny when he's like, guess what? Here's my wife, the class rep. Like, he doesn't say her name. He just calls her class rep.
Right, that's true.
I'm like, oh, so good.
It's so interesting because, for one thing, these are characters that are fine in the rest of the series, but I never really cared that much about.
Yeah.
But I was surprised by like how much I enjoyed seing them again.
I mean, Ida was a total badass as an adult.
It was cool too because like even going back to, obviously the rebuilds are a different timeline. We'll get into that later. But like even in the original series, he would always kind of be camping off on his own, away from town. He'd always like sneak off, and I was like, that's so cool that his adult character is basically just still that.
I also like something, it's kind of a subtle thing, and I don't even know if it's intentional, but like, especially in the original series, Ida's kind of always the horny boy.
Oh, sure.
And he's always like, oh, you're so lucky with Masato, and like always filming her and recording her.
Yeah.
And then the first time we see him, Asuka just bare-ass naked in the hang, no reaction from him whatsoever.
Right.
Just hands her a towel. It's just like, kind of like this, you see this kind of somewhat mature character development with him very subtly of just like, here you go, I've seen boobs now, I'm not worried about it.
Sure, yeah.
Also, don't know how I feel about the implication of their relationship because, like, sure, 14 years has passed, and
I was going to say Asuka, we could maybe get into this later because I wanted to focus on the positives now, but I definitely, at some point here, I do want to talk about the horniness and nudity of this movie.
Yes.
We'll get into that a little bit later, though, I think, because that's almost a lot to talk about, and a lot of that will be jumping around through multiple points of the movie. And right now, I just want to focus on how good this section is and not think about
amazing.
How weirdly problematic some of the nudity stuff is, but we'll get there eventually. I love the stuff with Rey here as well.
I was literally about to say that. Like I've never disliked Rey. Like Rey's been a fine character, but like I just always like, oh, Rey's fine. Like I like Rey. She's a good character, a lot of good character arc, but like I feel like this was probably, at least in my opinion, the best we've ever seen Rey for. It's very reminiscent of Rey getting excited for the dinner party kind of a game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where we finally get to see some personality and some excitement from Rey, and just her just learning things and doing things was like so nice.
Yeah.
And
I also just love, this a lot of stuff is cynical these days.
Yeah.
And even sometimes Evangelion in the past has been sometimes cynical of stuff. And I love that the community here, they're not just like, this girl's fucking weird, what's up with her? Like, they're so just nice and welcoming.
Yeah.
It's just such a, like, great, like,
which loving... I guess you could expect after the shit they've been through. Just like, oh, whatever.
True, yeah. But I also love that, like, their nicety is what informs her of how to be nice to Shinji, which is what brings him out of his depression. But I guess real quick on that note, I also loved it's because as like kind of beautiful and nice as so much of the stuff he is here, I did feel very emotional about a lot of stuff that happens here. I thought, granted, we've seen a lot of portrayals of depression throughout Evangelion. That's kind of a lot of the show. Yeah. But I really liked how they portrayed Shinji's just inability to even function.
Just completely shut off after what he just had. I feel like Shinji fully represents what just happened in 3.
Yes.
While the other people are kind of like moving on, trying to like do this. Like that's like his part is just being like, hey, don't forget, some like crazy shit just went down.
Yeah.
But I also kind of like how Shinji got to take a back seat, put him to the side for a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
So we can experience all this stuff through someone else's eyes who's actually going to appreciate. So then therefore, so that the audience get to see this in like a more like hopeful light.
Yes.
Because I think if we saw this through Shinji, I mean, eventually we get to that point, but like it would have been different than us getting to see it through Rei's eyes.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that creates a nice balance, but it lets Shinji get to really sit in that feeling, and it's a nice reminder to us of the audience not only of what happened but of his feelings as a character, which plays a lot into his characterization throughout the rest of the film and how he grows.
Big time. Like he becomes, for the first time kind of in the series for all, like a very mature kind of rational character, if I can even say so, in a way, which was great
for sure. One in terms of like just grabbing some of the small details, one other one I definitely don't want to miss here. I really love, I kind of got like Last of Us vibes from a couple of these lines. There's a scene when Toji is talking about how like after the near third impact, how like he did so much stuff that he is like not proud of. Yes. It's like, yeah, things were really rough for a while. Like you had to do just horrible stuff to survive, and I was a part of that. Like I mean, that's the kind of stuff in the post-apocalyptic stuff that I enjoy anyways, but I love not only that we address that like shit was horrible. I also I love that it creates so much imagination in your mind of like, you know, I don't want to see that stuff. I just love imagining what that could be.
Right. Because he would have been like, what, 14 or so like when that happened?
Yeah.
So here's this 14-year-old boy who has a younger sister and family.
Just doing whatever it takes to survive, which again, very like Last of Us. Mm-hmm. But then I also love the juxtaposition of like, now those people that went through all that stuff, that older generation, decided like, we're going to come together and create a community where we don't have to live like that. Just a very nice, hopeful kind of thing, even in the face of all this other stuff. And obviously hope is a big factor and theme in this movie, more so than it ever was in the original series. The original ending of End of Eva is a little hopeful. Shinji, you know, does decide like, oh, maybe life is worth living. Yeah. But it's more hopeful almost for him personally. Right. This is a lot more hopeful for not only Shinji personally, but like kind of the world itself. Yes. In a way that Evangelion never has been. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about this in the finale, or probably a decent amount more about in the finale. But thematically, I think that shows probably the personal growth in Anno as well. Yeah. Probably, you know, I'm speculating there a little bit. Because, you know, I don't know. I did hear there's some kind of a documentary on Amazon right now that's like following him as he's making this movie. Oh, I'd be really good to see, years. Yeah. So I really want to see that. But I'd be curious to know if him as a person, like I definitely got the impression that the portrayal of Gendo in this movie was Anno as he used to be. Mm-hmm. And the portrayal of Shinji in this movie is like Anno as he grew up to be. Yeah. And again, that's somewhat speculatory, but I feel like that seems pretty accurate. Yeah.
It does seem like Anno and Gendo and I can't even Shinji's character kind of looks like mirrors of each other, but at different stages almost in a way, which definitely. Is kind of
the way some of Gendo's, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but the way Gendo when we're kind of in his mind and all that vision stuff, it reminded me of more of Shinji in the original.
Exactly. Show. That's exactly how I took it. It's like it's almost as if like this is the Shinji we knew. He became Gendo. Yeah. And like not to get like too meta like that, like not like an actual in the story like that, but like as far as like thematic and like spiritual version of kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anything else to say about Village 3 before we move on? We do meet Ryoji Kaji the second.
Yes. That's big.
I thought that was really, really interesting.
Yeah. When I first saw him, he's drawn so similarly to Shinji in a way. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, is Shinji gonna have a weird clone now too? Is this where we're going with this?
Right. I'm glad shit. we definitely can't move on from this section yet because we talked about Rei, but not what happens to Rei.
True. Yeah.
Which is kind of a big deal. But it's kind of after Rei has brought Shinji out of his state, and he's kind of been re-implemented back into society. He's still kind of, still working on it. Like, he's not fully back to how he would have been maybe in like 2. But then Rei just realizes that she cannot live anymore unless she's back at Nerve HQ, which is impossible for her. And I also love that for a minute I thought like, oh, maybe that's going to be the reason they go back to Nerve, is like she's going to go talk to Shinji and be like, Shinji, you got to get me back, and like it's going to be a rescue mission. But I love that it's just like, no, she just says like, yeah, this is it for me. I'm glad I got a moment to be happy. And and then obviously there's stuff with her name as well too. We can't dive into every single thing here, but I thought that moment, it's very tragic, but it's also weirdly bittersweet. Like, of her, even though she dies, like it, because we get to see all these nice moments from her, and it's also such a catalyst for Shinji's character moving on. And
I feel like it was such a good thing of, she was such a good vehicle for us to get a glimpse of the world, get Shinji out of his funk in a certain way, but also like that small period of time they let us view things through her eyes, right, really made you get attached to her all over again. Yeah, even though this is like a different Rei, it's a way for us to like fall in love with another Rei again. Yeah, and just for that to be immediately taken away so quickly.
Yeah, I feel like it was deeper than, like, it didn't exist just. It's not like they killed her just to serve the Shinji's character. Yes. I felt like they gave her so much good characterization here that it felt like a good end to her story.
Exactly. I also felt
of just being like a vehicle
like the
Shinji.
Consequences of her death for Shinji, I think, went in the direction I wasn't expecting, but I think was much better too. Like, that became really important because usually, like, I saw this happen, I was like, oh great, here we go, Shinji's going back to being a little bitch again. Right. But instead, Shinji's like, all right, no, I'm fucking ready to fight. I'm ready to do this.
He uses this as like an experience of the world and of maturing and growing up.
It's like after everything he just saw and everything, that this final straw popped, but instead of, crying and whining like he usually does, he's like, I'm finally ready to just do something about this. Right. And I thought that was great. And it kind of sets a tone for his character for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, definitely. On that note, since he does decide to, get back into action, he agrees to go with Asuka and go back onto the... So I feel like in 3 they called it the Wunder, but here they definitely called it the Wonder. Yes. At least in some parts.
So reading some like plot things like before I got here, it is literally listed 2 different ways. Okay. So I think Wonder is the ship. Mm-hmm. I think Villa or whatever is the organization. Right. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, I feel like there was some weird mispronunciation stuff there at some point, but we'll just call it the Wonder. So yeah, they get back on the ship, and then there's some nice moments here before we kind of get into the big actiony stuff. I like Ritsuko and Misato kind of talking, giving a little bit of information about like what happened to Kaji, why they have this ship, and some of that stuff. Yeah. I like her even like looking at the picture of her son, like a lot of like kind of like nice small moments here.
Kind of getting to see Misato's humanity again.
Yeah, which was nice because that was so lacking from 3. Yeah. And I also felt like we got to see more of like Ritsuko in this movie in general, but especially during some of these scenes because it's like her character compared to her in the original are so drastically different. Yes. I remember even watching 3 being like, wait, she's with Misato now? Like, she didn't stay with Gendo? That's interesting. Yeah. To the point where I even got to a point in this movie where I was thinking like, I bet she's going to betray Misato. Right. And like she led them into this trap or something. But it was like, no, that's not what happens at all. Which is good because I think that would have been a little cliche. Yeah.
But it was kind of nice where in 3, you just have this overall tension and lack of humanity from so many of the characters. Mm-hmm. Because it's just they're trying to lay down the feeling of like what Shinji did caused some real bad shit to happen. Right. But this one's kind of good where it kind of peels back that veil and being like, here's why they feel that way. They're still human, stuff like that, but like, look what's been happening. Like, this is why they feel this way here. But also, they're still human. They still have all these emotions, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really great. Kind of like after seeing everything from 3, getting to see the other side of it too, which is like, they're just putting on this front, in a way. Yeah, definitely. I also like, there's a kind of a nice moment between Shinji and Toji's sister here. Yes. Which I thought was pretty good. Maybe here's a good time to talk about Mari. Because she kind of comes back into... She was in the beginning, but like now she's back and there's several scenes with her around here. I don't like Mari. I do not mind Mari. I don't mind her. I don't hate her. I don't love her. But she serves her purpose.
I guess.
But I will say, like, the purpose is definitely put there. You know what I mean? Like, and at the end of the day, like, it didn't need to be there.
I just kept waiting for, like, the other shoe to drop with her character and to be like, oh, that's why she exists as a character.
Even the main theory everybody had about her came true.
Yes, from the
but
picture.
with no actual context for it.
Right. I still, like,
I assume
it's
she's
now
one of
confirmed, but I'm just like, I have more questions now. I'm like, wait,
I'm assuming she's one of the first pilots.
I assume so.
So that's why she still has the curse.
I assume, but we don't get that information. And to be fair, we should say, maybe this is a good time to bring up, like, we are not the kind of people that need everything answered. Just like the media we consume, that's fine. Like, you don't, I mean, we're big Evangelion fans in the first place, and End of Eva certainly doesn't explain a lot of things. The original series, 25 and 26 episodes, don't explain everything. That's fine. I don't need an answer to everything. But there are certain things that it's nice to at least have a little bit of context for. And I feel like there's two types of mysteries in a show or a movie. There's the type of mystery where you go like, wow, that's really interesting. I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. And there's type of mysteries where you're like, just fucking tell me.
Yeah.
Like, what am I personally getting out of theorizing about Mari and her relationship with the parents? Like, for me, nothing. Now, granted, some other people are different. You might be like, oh, I want to think of a whole story about that. But for me, I'm just like, just fucking tell me. I don't care.
In my mind, I feel like, and I don't think this is a bold stretch. I think this is literally what they were trying to say, is the original group of people coming together to figure this out was Gendo, Yuri, Mari, and Futsuki.
Yeah.
And they were the group trying to put it together. Mari's purpose was to be the original test pilot. She was, kind of worked out, and then I don't know how she got from that point to wherever she got to now.
Yeah.
But that clearly, like, based off the relationship she had with Fusuke and all that stuff like that, like, I feel like that's just, to me, that was her character. And for which I feel like she had an impact on the overall story. That's all I need, personally.
I felt like what I really liked so much about the original series was that it took a lot of characters that it would give you at first, and you might be like, I don't know if I like this character. Shinji, for example. Everybody's like, oh, he's a little bitch. But by the end of the show, you're like, you get it. Whether you might not like the character more necessarily, depends on you and your subjective tastes, but you're like, oh, I understand 100% why this character's like this. I think Asuka's another good example where you first meet Asuka, she's just loud and abrasive and annoying, and by the end of the show you're like, oh, Asuka's a fantastic character. Like, wow, she's so well written. Misada's another great example. Like, you get so much more out of them. Even Rei, who's like this, it seems like empty doll, like barely a character, but in the series you understand her so much better. I was waiting for something like that with Mari. Anything.
So
like
people
that.
have hated Mari since the first one.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered if that's always been purely intentional by Anno. If Anno's way of just like, you guys have fanboyed over all these characters.
Who's the best girl or whatever.
Yes, I'm gonna make an antithesis character that you guys just will never like.
I think that's definitely possible, because I do think you could kind of see this a little bit in the other Evil movies, but I think especially in this one, Anno is very specifically doing things in that meta nature of like, I don't even necessarily want to say to troll the audience, because I don't think it's necessarily quite that mean-spirited.
Yes.
But like, definitely to play with expectations in certain ways, which I'm fine with, and I actually like when a lot of media does that, as long as at the end of the day I get something out of it.
Sure.
And I think, sure, maybe that character exists for that, but you still could have done something with her that, like...
Yeah.
Because, I mean, again, I don't want to jump ahead too far, but the movie straight up ends with, like, her and Shinji, not, like, together, but, like, it ends with those two
I want to
characters.
talk more about that later.
So we'll talk more about that later.
Yeah.
But that's the idea where I'm just like, I wasn't sold. Then that's the ending of the movie, and I was just like, oh, that's not it? Like, we'll get to that later. But I just would have liked more out of her character in general.
Yeah. I just feel like part of me just has a feeling that character was for Anno and nobody else.
Yeah.
For some weird
That's
reason.
fair, but also if you're going to make a movie where I have to keep watching that character, like... then I'm certainly allowed to dislike her if that's...
Yes, absolutely. I think most people dislike her, and that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't dislike her character, but I also don't like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. She's there.
Exactly in the middle for me.
Although, if she was originally one of the pilots and was stuck with the curse, so she has the body of, I don't know how old actually she's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Let's just say 14 or 15, because that's what the other pilots are. Her mind wouldn't be like, even Asuka in this movie, who still has the curse, is like, I'm an adult now, which is fair. She's been alive for 28 years or 30 years or however long. So in the second Rebuild movie, because if she was 14 when Gendo and Yui were together and Yui was alive, she would at least be double that now, because that's around the time they would have had Shinji. So she would also be around 20 or 30. So in the second movie, or also in this movie, but anytime she basically pushes up her boobs against Shinji and is like, I'm the girl with big boobs, that's fucked up and weird.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of do it with Masato too, though. It kind of shows a mental maturity rather than an actual maturity of a character.
Yeah, I guess maybe this is a good time to talk about the weird sexual stuff in this movie.
Well, so, okay, talking about that Masato, I really, really enjoyed that instead of the cliche immature Masato we kind of get, we get her humanity back, but she's more of a motherly character, which I think fits her so much better.
Yes.
Than like, I think the immaturity part's important because it shows her growth, but I do like seeing motherly Masato. Like, she's not being weird and saying horny things to Shinji.
Sure.
She's very much like, I care about you, I'm a mom now, and like, you're a young boy I care about in a healthy motherly way, not in a weird I'll make you feel uncomfortable way.
Right. Which is really quick, we touched on this a little bit already, especially with like Shinji and Gendo, but it almost feels like the characters in this particular iteration of whatever this loop is it's almost like they're somehow not actually literally aware, but somehow aware of their past lives and have grown from them. Because like, yeah, this Misato is an evolution of the original one.
We can get more to this, but I almost feel like that's obviously also on purpose too.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I think the theme of this
thematically,
is that, thematically.
But I think, to me, the original series definitely had problematic horny stuff, but I think there's a couple things. A, it was something that was already out and released for years and years, so it was like, well, what are we going to do? It already is there.
Yeah.
But B, I felt like for the most part, even if some of that stuff could be potentially problematic, it served an important purpose to the characters and the story. Like, sure, is it okay that Misato did that? No, that's fucking creepy. But once you knew more about her character and realized that, like, she only really knew how to have connections and relationships with people through sexuality.
Yeah.
And it was like, that doesn't make it right, but you understood it.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same way like Gendo's a villain. You don't have to like him. You don't have to agree with what he does, but you understand why he's a villain.
Yeah.
And so I felt like a lot of the sexuality in the original show really had a purpose. Even like it had, you know, you'd see Asuka basically naked all the time, but it usually was specifically in relation to how Shinji as a character felt about her. Yes. It wasn't just to show like, here's a naked girl.
It was both those two characters kind of going through their puberty together, but also Asuka wanting to be viewed as more mature than she really was.
Right.
So
almost a similar problem to Misato, where it's like that's how she felt like a woman needed to be.
She's like, oh, this is what women are like, so this is what I want to be like.
Yeah. So I felt like all that stuff really had a purpose, and some of it here has somewhat of a purpose. I mean, we brought up Asuka towards the beginning, where she's walking around naked, and you even said like it shows a little bit of Kinsuke's growth potentially, but it also shows like Shinji. It's a moment for him of seeing her, and she's like, "What? You don't feel anything for this anymore?" And we realize like, no, he at this point he's just traumatized. Like, he doesn't see a naked girl and get embarrassed or anything. He literally like sees the choker and throws up because he's having such traumatic flashbacks.
Yeah.
So that particular one served a purpose, but boy, there are a lot of other shots. There's one I remember where I think it's when Asuka and I think Mari are putting on their plug suits, and it's like a weird camera. It's like from almost like perspective of like her feet, like looking up at her body. Shots like that just serve no purpose and made me feel really creepy.
Is there other nudity besides that? Was the only thing I could remember.
Well, there's several other times where we see Asuka in like an open up kind of shirt, like even when she comes back in the Ava later on.
To me, I kind of saw this like she like because they talk about it kind of with Rey in a way where like they don't have any other clothes there, but I also kind of took that as a way of like because the hint that we know now, I guess not hint, we know now that like Asuka kind of has like she's part angel now, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
So to me, I took that as a part of like, I mean, yeah, you could have done it a different way, but I took that as a way of just being like, oh, she doesn't understand this like quote unquote Lilin lifestyle, and like why are you so embarrassed to buy what you look like and to form like that, like kind of thing like that. Just like I don't care, I don't need to wear these clothes. What's the point?
But even like there's shots of Rey early on in the movie where like we see her like bend over and the camera is just up her ass.
Yes.
Which again, you could argue, well, the original show had shots like that. Yes, but they were usually framed specifically like with Shinji in the shot, so it would be like you're meant to get out of that not, oh, I'm horny as an anime watcher. You're meant to get like, this is a moment for Shinji because he is going through a sexual awakening through puberty.
Yeah, he's going through a sexual awakening while also trying to still avoid that, because the point of him is trying to run away from his maturity.
And that's why those frames are meant, they're not meant to be horny, they're meant to be kind of awkward.
Yeah.
Because he's conflicted on what he's supposed to feel.
They're meant to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, there are shots that you could look at out of context and go like, oh, that's pervy and weird. But in context, it's like, oh, that's actually really clever.
And like, in shots like that for this one, which, I mean, to be fair, this, I guess not to be fair, just to say about the whole entire rebuild series, a lot of those things have been more fan servicey than anything.
Yes, definitely.
Which I don't know if.
Again, maybe
who's
that's
making them do that?
Maybe that's another meta thing of
maybe it's
Anno trying to troll people.
Yeah, is it a meta thing? Is it somebody in the studio being like, hey, this sells action figures, so you got to do it?
I guess so.
You know, I don't know where that comes in at. So,
but it definitely felt weird, especially just even the idea of the curse in the first place. I always felt like it was a weird excuse to be like, hey, these characters are legal now, so it's okay, even though they have the body.
Right.
Like, and I didn't feel like 3 took advantage of that. Even though it introduced the curse, I almost felt like this movie did in a way where I was just like, you purposely, granted, some of the shots of Asuka nude later on are when she has grown up.
Yeah.
I guess to be fair, but like, there's so many shots of her where it's like, you created a character who was canonically 14 and still has technically, biologically, the body of a 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And you're just like flaunting her nudity. Yeah. I don't know. It felt weird. I don't want to linger on it too much longer because that's not what people are here to listen to anyways.
Yeah.
But it was something I wanted to touch on because it was something that I definitely took note of in this movie.
Yeah.
So after we, I guess before we get into the finale, the battle here, there is a scene when Asuka and Mari come back and visit Shinji, kind of like one last time, they believe, because they think they're going on essentially a suicide mission. I
think this is another kind of cool thing of showing maturity and change of characters.
But I wish this scene was just Asuka and Shinji and not Mari.
I agree. I wish Mari doesn't need to be there.
Yep.
Also, just a real quick, small, tiny thing. I watched it dub. I'm assuming you also watched it dub.
I did, yes.
So we watched it dub. I always watch.
Sorry, everybody.
Everything I watch, which is ironic because I watch everything no matter what with subtitles at all times. And for the most part, it was almost like word for word, exactly the same, which I like. But there's a few things where I just don't understand why they use the word in the dub over the word in the sub, because it's not a cultural thing. They're words we're familiar with.
Right.
Like when they shake hands, and there's like, this is how, what is it to make a connection with someone like that?
It's something I don't remember.
But in the dub, it's just like, oh, this is how you try and form a bond with someone, which to me, hearing made more sense than what they said. Like when they said it in the dub, I'm just like, no one talks like that.
Right, yeah.
And so I thought it was weird. It's like if we said, oh, this is how you form a bond with someone, that made sense. The other thing I hate is I don't like that Mari calls Shinji doggy, because in the sub, it's puppy boy, which I think sounds way more derogatory and kind of playful than doggy.
Yeah.
So like, weird. Why don't you just call him puppy boy? Because she even calls him puppy at the other point. It's like, just call him puppy.
Huh. Yeah, I didn't notice that. Yeah, I don't want to get into the dub versus sub thing.
Yeah, I just want to point this to.
I'm just saying, if people are listening and are like, why'd they watch the dub? Look, if you listen to our original podcast, which I understand a lot of people didn't, that's fair. Or if it's also, even if you did, it's been a fucking long time. I don't expect you to remember this. But we talked about dub versus sub. We're not going to get back into it. We watched the dub. Get over it, guys.
Just settle down.
Let people enjoy stuff the way they want to enjoy it. How's about? Anyways, so yeah, we get the scene of Shinji and Asuka, and it's a good moment. It shows Shinji's kind of character growth here.
Shows Shinji character growth. So is Asuka's kind of like deviation from this isn't the same Asuka. Like not only is her name different, but like just like her being like, I used to have a crush on you. Like her self-awareness of actually saying that out loud is something her other character would never would have said ever. But her not even saying it, being like, not only did I used to have a crush on you, but like I'm matured past you to this point. Yeah. Like you're not the only boy I know anymore. You didn't really do anything for me. It's just like, oh, this is like kind of like it was like kind of like such a subtle, cool, like mature moment of just Asuka being like, I'm over you. Yeah. Like walking, I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Definitely. This is where the movie, I know we talked a little bit about like some problems I had with it, like the nudity and stuff, but like, you know, plot-wise, character-wise, I was really loving almost everything up till now. This is where things kind of start to unravel a bit for me. And also in terms of like, boy, we're going to skip past a lot of like names and what exactly is happening because fuck, it's a lot. Yeah. So we'll just kind of like broad strokes say this. They arrive at Antarctica, where Second Impact occurred, where Nerve Base has now flown to, and is now presiding in. Nerve is down in the they call them like eggs, right? Or was it? That's what they call them in the original show, right? Like so. It's the egg. It's down in kind of this space where Adam would have been back in the day before Second Impact, and it is now using this what they call a sphere. It's been a while since I took geometry. I don't think that was a sphere.
Yeah.
But there's
a lot of terms and words thrown around in these things. It just This specifically is the thing I guess I wish I had watched again before recording, because this is the part where there's so much terminology thrown
and
at you.
I did go back through the scene loosely before we recorded and wrote down some
just
of them.
So many. I'm just like, am I supposed to know what this means? Is this new information to like that's the part where it's like, God, I wish I had read a bunch more stuff, because like you say this like I know what this is.
So here's the thing I want to talk about, a distinction between End of Eva, or even just the original series in general, and the stuff in this sequence. There were always a lot of terms thrown around in the original show that we didn't know.
Yeah.
But I felt like either A, we eventually got context for it, like we first hear Second Impact, and it's like, what the fuck does that mean? And then we kind of get some context for it, and by the end of the show, we super understand it. There's other stuff that they don't fully explain. There's a lot of terms, especially in the End of Eva, during the Third Impact sequence, where people are just saying, like, oh, this is this door of whatever. Like, but that, I felt like it was minimal enough that it didn't bother me, and I didn't feel overly confused by it. In this, they throw so much terms so fast that do feel like they're supposed to be more important. In the original, it was just like, I mean, first of all, you could sort of use context clues. If somebody says, oh, it's this thing happening, it's the tree of life, and then we see like this giant tree thing, it's like, okay, I don't know exactly what that means specifically, but I get what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And this, where they're like, we're going into the anti-universe, and Gendo's using quantum teleportation, and we found a black Lilith, or Evangelion imaginary.
Yes, yeah.
That all that means fucking dick to me. Like,
it almost felt like a joke.
Maybe that's
like,
the other thing. Is like we talked about the meta.
It almost felt when he's just like, oh, it's imaginary Eve. I'm just like, that feels like a joke.
I'm
and
sure
when they're like, oh, he's gonna
yeah.
cause an additional impact. Oh no, not because it's not even just like additional as in like additional impact. It's capital A.
Yes.
Capital impact. It's just like additional impact. I'm like, what
and
is
then,
that?
then the fact that like so. They have near third impact, which they sometimes just call in 3I. Okay, fine. But if that was near third impact, implying that third impact was stopped, which it was, then that would mean that this should be third impact.
Right.
Because we didn't have third impact. We had near third impact.
I also thought that.
But Misato calls it fourth impact, and then Gendo calls it additional impact.
Okay. So I guess we should also go into the fact we now find out Gendo's God?
Yes.
So now talking about what's her name? I even hold the characters. Ritsuko.
Yes.
Ritsuko like does a total different character turn. Shoots Gendo like definitive like I'm gonna shoot you because like you're a bastard. Dead on shot in the face. We find out like Gendo's brains fall on the ground. He picks him up. It's kind of fucking cool. And then we find out like Gendo's a god, which is like it just at first I kind of chuckled because it's kind of funny seeing Gendo float, but like it kind of has some cool context.
Yeah.
And so the way I took this is he did start fourth impact. And then while fourth impact was occurring, he then causes additional impact.
Yeah, I could see that.
So he's starting everybody doing their stuff, everything's going on, and the additional impact is for him to reunite himself with Yuri. So that's what he's kind of doing, is like an additional impact. So an impact within an impact, I think, is what they were trying to say. At least that's how I took it.
Sure.
Because that's why you had the two
That
different
makes sense.
spears. It's like one's for this impact, one's for the additional impact, to do that all jazz.
I'm just quick side note. I'm curious if anybody. I wonder if anybody's listening to this and just like yelling at the screen, like, "Get this shit right! You're supposed to be talking about this movie. You don't even know what fucking happened in it." And I get that. I've been there with sometimes when I watch people review stuff. But a couple things about that. A, this just came out and we didn't want to wait 2 months until everybody knew everything to make this fucking
Exactly.
podcast.
Because why else would you listen to this?
Yes.
Point.
And two, like, hats off to you if you watched this one time and got all of this information correct.
And if you did, or if we're doing dumb stuff, I'm not mad if you post in the comments and like actually, I would love that. Actually, I would love for you to enlighten me on some of these things.
Yeah, I would like to. I mean, I would like to stay in the comments on this one a little bit if people do comment. And I mean, we did that with the original show where like we would actually
even
talk
if you
to
have like there's something that maybe you don't even like do that too. I mean,
definitely.
I would love to know the information.
I mean, that was something we discovered with the original show when we did it. Was like I always come at Evangelion as loving it more from a thematic kind of a show. I'm less interested in the plot specific stuff and more interested in like what it means for characters and growth.
I think this is one of the main points I'm talking about. My differences of content I like now versus then. I think, and I still do to some extent, but I think then I really enjoyed content with mysteries because I like trying to theory craft and come up with ideas. And I still to some point do that. But I think after having so many shows end so disappointingly with the stuff like that, because no one can ever stick the landing, I now appreciate just kind of consuming the content. And I feel like this movie was perfect for that because I was no longer looking for what I was looking for before in the show. I enjoyed it for completely different reasons. And so kind of having this be different than that. Kind of, I think what made me like it a little bit more.
Right.
Where I think if I had watched this back then, I probably wouldn't like it as much.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was kind of getting at. I was like, Evangelion is different people like it for different reasons.
Yes.
Which we discovered in the original show because there were people that didn't care at all about what this represented or was a metaphor for. They just cared specifically about like, I want to know about the Chamber of Guff.
Yeah,
and that's fine.
I'm gonna say secrets for some reason. It's like I don't remember that.
But yeah, I guess quickly on that note, I do want to say I didn't. Though I'm gonna dog on this finale a lot as we go through it. I didn't want it to be like the original. I like the differences in the show. That's what I said before. It's like we already had the original, so I don't want to do it again.
Exactly.
But that being said, I did want something that still left me. It didn't even need to be mysterious because I don't even necessarily love the original because of like mysteries. But it left me thinking about things on a bigger scale. I mean, Evangelion was a show for me that I watched, in high school. And this might sound dumb to some people. Maybe you had this revelation way before I did, if you're listening. But like to me, it was the first time where I started to think about people on a bigger, deeper scale of how different people were internally, how much stuff was going on inside of each of us that was so separate, how experiences between us could feel so different, even though sometimes we were going through the same stuff.
Like it feels like it kind of really shines light on this perspective of like, I feel like I'm going through the worst thing ever, but someone else also might be doing the exact same thing.
Yeah,
like
it was so eye-opening, and I get that I don't want them to do that exact same thing twice, but by the end of this thing, I was like, oh, that was just a weird, crazy story. Mm-hmm. And I'm not, that's a little bit reductive. There are themes here. We've talked about this a little bit. The big theme here is growth and maturation and becoming an adult. So it's not like that stuff isn't here.
I also
feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm older, but Anno is also even older than me, and I feel like those themes are like almost like no-brainer kind of a theme, so they didn't feel as interesting.
I also think some of the themes are outside of necessarily Evangelion themselves.
I agree.
The themes are more talking to the audience on the outside.
Definitely. It's definitely the most meta this series has ever been.
Incredibly meta.
Which is cool. And again, in terms of me saying, like, I don't want to like the original, I want new aspects of it. That's a great, interesting new angle. To me, where this really gets bogged down is how heavily it dives into the story and lore and all of these terms and everything. And granted, I think you could watch this and think, well, that stuff's not really important, similar to how it wasn't the most important thing in the original series. But I feel like they linger on it a lot more here. Yeah. And again, like we were talking about, like these terms they throw at us, they really say them in terms of like, and it might be a meta joke or whatever, but they still present them as these dramatic, serious things to the point where I was like, could we just not?
It is the most hold handy of all of the series. Like it very much wants you to not be confused. Right. And I don't know if that's because that's how Honor decided to tell things this time, or if he was like, since this is going to be the last time I'm telling the story, I don't want you guys to ever have this thing of like, I still don't know what this means, kind of thing. I don't know.
Sort of how when 25 and 26 ended, the episodes. Yeah. People were like, they wanted to kill him and demanded a new thing, and so he made it into Eva. Maybe with this one, he was like, I'm not leaving you wanting anything.
Yeah, you're going to
by the end of this movie, you're not going to want any more Eva.
Exactly.
You're going to be over it.
Yes, exactly.
Which
it really did seem like that's kind of the main point. Because one of the main recurring themes in this one is the number 3. It's in the title twice. It's like they mention the number 3, like there's number 3 this, number 3 that. Every like thing is like number 3. I think he's just really hitting the point, being like, "Hey guys, this is the third fucking time I've ended this thing. Yeah, I'm done with it. Yep, like that's it. Like I kind of like, I feel like Thrice Upon a Time is a meta joke in itself. Of this isn't once upon a time, this is thrice upon a time because I've done this 3 times now. Kind of thing. So I was like, I kind of thought that was clever.
Yeah, I agree.
But also, especially when you get to the end, kind of emphasizes the point Anna's trying to make. I think at some extent it's like, I'm over Ava now. I'm done.
Right. And this is one of those things that's tough for me because, and to be fair, I am in no way like one of those fans that would send Anno death threats. Don't get, not at all. Like, I'm not crazy. If I don't like something, I get over it and move on. But the point I was going to make is I do feel like if that's how he really felt in a meta sense of like, I'm over this, I don't want to keep telling the story, then maybe he shouldn't have told it.
Sure.
You know, when you have that much disdain for so much of your fan base, then that comes across in your film.
I don't see it as disdain.
I don't either necessarily, but I'm just saying if that is some of the meta implications,
sure,
then that must be at least an aspect of it. And maybe if we are talking about how like this is just a joke on this audience, this is just a joke on this audience.
Yeah.
I get why I totally understand why as a creator he would want to do that with his fan base being shitty to him. But at the same time, that doesn't necessarily make a good movie.
Sure. Because we'll get into it when we talk about the actual end. But I have a thing that I feel like that's why he was doing that.
Sure.
We can get into later.
Yeah, we kind of been jumping around here a little bit. So there's this. We don't need to talk about this too much because I hate this action scene. I think the CG is just terrible. And
we're talking about the fight between Gendo.
No, not yet.
Okay.
We'll get there. Just when the Wonder arrives and dives through into this big area.
Yes.
And there's all the mass-produced Evas all around, and they're like, "Oh, that ship wasn't supposed to be done yet. Neither was this other one." And there's a fourth ship. This almost felt like, and again, maybe it's a meta thing. This almost felt like Marvel-esque, and not in a good way because we like the Marvel movies.
Yeah.
But this felt like superhero-esque, where it's just there's one more thing and one more form of this thing, and we didn't expect this. It didn't feel like, because you could argue the original, again, I brought this up earlier with the mass-produced Evas were a surprise that just came out of nowhere. But with this, with the ship thing, it just felt silly and ridiculous, and they just kept. It almost felt like a gag of there's another secret ship.
Right.
And it was just what's the point of this?
Yeah.
But then, so the Evangelions with Mari and Asuka dispatch to go kill or destroy, however you want to say it, Unit 13 before it can be reactivated to cause fourth impact. Of course, not surprisingly, this is all part of Gendo's plan. He had all this all along. I do really like the scene where Asuka awakens the angel inside her. This was another one of those fan theories that seemed pretty obvious and did pay off here, but I
also think that scene is important in setting up what becomes a common recurring theme for this one and kind of the whole series in general of the AT field. Her AT field is not letting her attack the unit because of her fear. So it's kind of putting in that thing of the AT field is a barrier between people. Because the most common theme of this whole, literally Ray picks up a book of the story is the Hedgehog's dilemma.
Yes.
Of not being able to get too close to people without hurting kind of thing. So I feel the AT fields have always kind of represented that whole entire kind of bit of just that barrier between you and people for protection.
Right.
And so but we've always seen that protecting the person. We've never seen their own AT field protecting them from something they're scared of, which kind of becomes a common important.
But that's the interesting thing is we've never seen that literally represented by an AT field.
Yeah.
But even the original did subtly bring up this kind of idea that because angels and humans are basically the exact same DNA-wise, that they even kind of talk about people almost in a way have their own AT fields. They didn't mean it quite literally in the show, but they meant that with the Hedgehog's dilemma and stuff like that, people do put up kind of these barriers against each other. And this is another one of those things where when you talk about this movie being more hand-holdy, I liked the subtlety of the original, where in this they literally just show you it. And are see what we mean?
Yeah.
And again, jumping just slightly ahead real quick, a lot of the stuff with Gendo, which I did like in this movie, his kind of interior monologue stuff, I thought was really good, but also the original show kind of touched on that too in End of Eva. We get a little bit of his sense of regret and being maybe I should have tried to talk to Shinji, maybe I should have been a good dad. And I liked the subtlety of that, because in terms of this being and not like the original, that kind of element was very similar to the original, but this is just do you guys get it? Do you guys get that he should have been a better dad? And it was I got it the first time. I didn't need 20 minutes of hammering at home. Not, again, I liked that stuff. It wasn't I thought that stuff was terrible. But it also felt this could have been a lot shorter and got the same point across, because they already did get the same point across in the original show. Granted, again, in terms of how the characters have grown and changed, some of that is a little different here.
I do feel that's kind of a general common thing that happens in this one, where it's things we know, I've seen already, but they're taking those and just making it longer and expanding on it more. I don't know if because he has a long movie, he felt he could do that, because this is the longest movie in the whole series.
Yes.
And he's just I'm just going to expand on everything. It really just seems he does not want you to be confused about any information he's giving you.
That's another thing, just really quick, because I did think this movie dragged a little bit,
it was
especially
a little
in the second half. And again, it's not because it's slow. I couldn't talk more about how much I love the opening, which is slow as fuck. It's not that I don't mind something being really slow and taking its time. In fact, part of the reason I don't like a lot of this finale is it's way too fast. Again, especially with the terms and we're just jumping between so many different things.
Because I feel that particular part where all these things are happening and saying these new terms is more or less the most important part of this, because it's explaining what's about to happen.
Right.
But it's thrown at you so quick. Everything is just verbally diarrheaed out so fast. I'm just whoa, you just told me, you just had a sentence of 5 new words I've never heard before. What's going on?
It felt and I do mean this in a bad way, it kind of reminded me weirdly of the Matrix sequels. where it was just like, oh man, there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
Like, oh God, there's
it's
so
like you
much.
need a friggin' like dictionary glossary with like to be going on with this to be like, all right, what's this?
And I feel like that's why we're even having trouble like staying on track here, because it's just like it feels like you're just bouncing back and forth so much.
Yeah.
But anyways, Asuka, because it was all Gendo's plan, is defeated, and so let's cut back to the scene between Gendo and Ritsuko and Misato, because we touched on it already, but I do want to say I love the scene where Ritsuko shoots him.
Yep.
This is another one of those great moments of character growth of she's the one that shoots him. I also love that, like, at first she shoots him and just hits the goggles and it's like, oh, okay, whatever. And I was like, just shoot him again. And then she fucking does and literally blows his brains out, which I was like, okay, that's already awesome. She like came and interrupted his monologue. I was like, I don't fucking care. Shut the fuck up, dude. Great moment of growth between the original show and now. But then I also love this crazy, weird plot twist of like Gendo just scooping his brains and putting it back in. Yeah, that was
such a cool fucking scene.
I loved, obviously it was weird that he had the visor in the last one, but I honestly never thought that much about it. But then the visual design of his face was so cool. Sure, it's a little goofy and maybe weird in a meta way, especially if we're talking about how we believe Gendo is sort of an analog for how Anno used to be, and now he's literally the god in this thing.
I liked it so much because so much of the other series is Gendo being the puppet master, and this one is Gendo doing the things himself now.
Yeah,
he's like, I'm going to do instrumentality. I'm going to start this shit now. I'm not relying on Shinji or anybody else again.
Right.
I'm doing. I was like, that felt like such a really cool changing character to finally kind of see Gendo just fucking, get his hands dirty, do the shit himself. I was like, oh, it was really cool. It was really, really cool.
Right. Here's the thing that I just thought of too. And like, if we're talking about like, if the idea of Gendo as a god in this movie is almost representative of what Anno felt originally as a creator. Sure. And if Shinji is sort of the new Anno that has grown up and matured, in the fight, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second, but just in the fight, there's several shots where they're battling and Shinji will like tear through a fake wall and we'll see like a movie set or something. Yeah. There's like C-stands and light stands up and stuff. Is this supposed to be like, since Anno is the god or the director,
right?
Shinji as the new form of growth and development is literally tearing apart the production that the director is putting on.
Yeah. It's almost like he's fighting against his old self.
Right.
And like how his old self would have ended
the show.
Yeah.
Like the concept of it.
Gendo was trying to end this thing in a certain way. Yeah. And Shinji interrupts and goes, no, actually, we're going to do this instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is, I definitely picked up on like some of those themes in general, but I think specifically like the tearing through the set represents that more than anything else. But anyways, before we get into the fight with Gendo and Shinji, there is the stuff where Shinji comes back and he's like, I do want to pilot it again. I don't love this brief scene where there's like a weird standoff of like
it's almost so fast and so easily resolved. It just kind of
it doesn't really feel like it has, because I thought for a minute it was like, oh, this is how Misato dies when she gets shot. I was like, that's why this scene is here. It's a lasting consequence. It's a crazy moment for Toji's sister to have done that. But then it's so just immediately like, oh, she's fine. The bullet will just dissolve right away.
Yeah.
It's just like, why did we have this scene other than just show like there is at least one character, because Toji's sister didn't hate Shinji, she's conflicted, but to show like there is one character who hasn't forgiven Shinji. But I
think it would have been better had we seen those characters, but they're quickly like, you're right, you better, you know what I mean? Instead of having the whole big long standoff and then get to the same conclusion.
Yeah.
If them being like, I don't want you to pilot, but you're our only hope, so you have to do it,
Yeah.
Would have given the same emotion of, we don't like this, but you need to do it, without having this really long standoff that actually had really didn't have any consequences whatsoever.
When characters pull out a gun and the end result of that scene is basically no consequence, then that's a bad scene.
Yeah, I not to go jump too far ahead again, but I think this would have been better if this could have been where Misato dies, and then later on the thing where Ritsuko could have been the character who stays with the ship. I think that would have been a good conclusion to like both their kind of characters, of just like, we're ending that thing we started kind of thing.
But Shinji does get the go ahead, I suppose, if you want to put it that way, and he goes down into the anti-universe.
God, this is where I'm just like, oh no.
Yes. I don't know if I flipped the paper loud enough, but it was literally one of those like checks notes kind of moments. Yes. I literally had to check my notes to remember what the fuck this was
just
called.
Like I think I don't dislike this as much as it seems like you dislike this, but I do dislike all of the term stuff they're throwing at. None of it felt cool.
Right.
It felt like you just were throwing spaghetti on a wall and picking weird names. It's just like,
that's, I think when I was talking about how End of Eva had a bunch of these terms, I think that's a big difference, is those felt cool and mysterious and interesting.
Yes, yeah.
even if I didn't feel like I actually needed the answer, it was so cool. It's like, ooh, that's an interesting term. And I felt like even 3.0 had some stuff with that where I was like, what is the Chamber of Guff or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, some of
this
that
was using
like,
actual
mysterious
terminology stuff, but putting it in a cool way.
Right.
This felt like that one scene in Ghost Rider where she's just throwing out terminology stuff about the internet because we don't really know what the internet is yet.
Right.
So you're just making up things that sound like the internet and cool, but they're not really that cool sounding.
I thought, and you didn't watch it, I don't think, unless you watched it recently, but the Snyder cut of the Justice League.
Yeah.
Steppenwolf's plan is to find the anti-life equation.
Yes, I do know that. Yeah.
And I was getting serious about it. When they say anti-universe, and I know it's just a coincidence, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, I was just like, oh man, like
it's like this
because they throw anti-universe and then immediately like he's using quantum teleportation, which is real. That's not a made-up term. Like quantum mechanics is real. Teleportation is theoretically possible through quantum mechanics. But still, just to have it in this way, it almost felt like. And again, maybe this is a meta thing, but it almost felt like either that superhero thing or like that kind of like lame side of anime where it's like he's using quantum teleportation. How are we gonna, it's
trying to
feels out of place.
It's trying to sound intelligent and sciencey without knowing what you're talking about, so it does sound silly. I mean, some of these names honestly just feel like placeholder names, and then they forgot to go back and change the names.
Yeah,
like they just like, oh, another impact. Oh, whoops, we forgot to name that one. Oh well.
I think a big part of my problem with some of this stuff too is, granted, in End of Eva, it goes, especially the Commissar Todd sequence with everything floating up into the sky and the beams of light and people turning into LCL. A lot of it is very abstract, but we still understand the physical space. We still understand Earth, the rooms we've been in. Like, sure, there's a giant ray, but we get it. We'll talk about giant ray in this movie in a minute. But in this, it's like a nothing space. It's like such a void, which I understand we had sort of the LCL void in the original where Shinji's going through his mind and all these characters. That was fine. It was abstract, but it was fine. I still understood it. But in this, like, they have to come in here with an Eva, but then Shinji just able to open up like a portal. He just like says like, "Hey Rei, open up a portal" or whatever. He doesn't literally say that, but like, and then even like Mari, like there's a part where she's just all of a sudden in Futsuki's ship. It feels like there's just no sense of reality here. And I understand not thematically, but like I don't even know the term I want to use here, but like that is where we are in the universe. This is like a void where nothing has a real form, a real place. But I found it so hard to not even wrap my head around, but just so hard to like appreciate anything because it all felt so abstract.
Right.
There was just like, this almost feels like nothing because it's so much of everything.
Right. It's just throwing everything at you and you take it as you want to. And
I think part of it too is like it's a really long sequence.
Yes.
Even when I was going back, I didn't rewatch the whole movie, but I did scrub through some of this stuff before we recorded just to get a refresher on some of it. I wasn't paying attention to the timestamps the first time I watched the movie, but going through it, I was obviously seeing it because I was scrubbing through the footage. By the time they enter the anti-universe and like to the finale is a very long time.
Yeah.
And that's a really long time to be in such an abstract place where you feel like there's no physical restrictions or whatever. And again, I know story-wise that makes sense, but like just in terms of like understanding anything, it made it really hard for me.
So like when he sees Rei and Rei has like really long hair, was it trying to insinuate Rei had been in
I believe
Unit 1 the entire time?
My interpretation of this, not the entire time, my interpretation of this was that at the end of 2, when Shinji,
that's what I
rescues,
meant. But the entire time, but the 14 years.
I believe that is Rei. Is that Rei 2? I don't even know.
Yeah.
Because the rebuilds are a different timeline. But whatever version of Rei that was, I believe that it's insinuated this is still that Rei.
Because like it seems like immediately like that Rei knows who Shinji is. Shinji doesn't seem weirded out by it. It's like, yeah. And then Asuka gets... Is that what is that gets taken? Like, is that actual Asuka or is that some like vision Asuka? She gets absorbed back into the plug again. Like, I'm not sure.
Oh, you mean the part when like the Asuka comes out of Unit 13 and I was a little confused by that.
I don't know what happened there really. Like, I'm kind of confused by what like really happened with Asuka in the general. That kind of
back to the Rei thing real quick. I think it's really weird because Shinji, like, granted he has matured and grown up, but that doesn't mean he knows everything in the universe now.
Yeah,
and he never knew what happened to that Rei. In 3.0, he believes that Rei he saved is this Rei, which I think people call Rei Q, right?
Well, also, it insinuates that Rei had been in the plug thing the whole entire time. But Shinji was in the plug, because wasn't he in space inside of Unit 1?
Was it that he was in Unit 1? I'm trying to remember how 3 started. I know he was in like a big crucifix thing. Was Unit 1 in that? Or was
I thought Unit 1 was also there. Maybe it was just
It might have been. It's been...
Who knows?
This is where people are going to yell at us. And be like, you idiots, you should have done research. But I just... Even when they enter the anti-universe, again, when Shinji just kind of looks and is like, Ayanami, and the portal opens, it's like... So now, just because he grew up as a person, he also understands that like, Rey is in here somewhere and can open portals for him?
It's like we get to see maturity growth and assuredness of Shinji. Mm-hmm. But it's almost like that ability gave Shinji, like, omnipotence.
Yeah.
And we don't know why.
Right.
Because he just doesn't feel... Take the he's not whining about anything. He's not confused about anything. He's just like, oh, open up a portal. Like, why do you know that's a thing?
Again, this is like... Matrix Revolutions vibes, which is like Neo's he just knows it all now. He just is able to just crack all the codes.
Shinji's only issue was he was whiny and mature, and now he solved that problem, so now he's God.
Yeah. And I mean, for the most part, I really like Shinji's trajectory in this movie. I think it's really well done. But this is the one thing where I would put like a pin in that and be like, I guess that's not the right term. But I would like pick
even
it
if
apart
it had been Rey who'd been like, here, this is what's going to happen.
And he's like,
I take it at face.
Ayanami. You know, he's a little confused.
Well, even
about
like
it.
being confused, but like taking things at face value now, because I think it's always been a problem with being so confused, but being like, sure, I mean, my mom's inside of a robot. Nothing's really weird anymore. Yeah, I kind of get that. Like him taking things at face value now, especially when you're in the anti-universe or whatever. So like, sure.
So anyways, he eventually gets to Unit 1 and gets to pilot it again because he doesn't have a 0% sync rate. He has the closest number to 0.
This is the most anime thing you've ever done.
And I would say in a bad way.
Yeah.
Where I was just like, I was literally rolling my eyes, just like, this felt like, I mean, I like stuff like Dragon Ball Z a lot, but it doesn't have a place in this type of anime.
Exactly.
And to me, this was like the most like power level thing.
It felt so meaningless.
Yes.
In the grand scheme of everything that happened.
And I feel like it was supposed to be a cool moment because it's a callback to the original 09 system.
Yeah.
The Oni system from the original, where it's like 0.99, whatever, you know, like it's a callback to that, but callbacks are usually supposed to be a moment where you're like, oh yeah, and here I was like, oh my god,
like at this one you don't get chills being like an infinity rate. It's like, I didn't know that was a thing. How am I supposed to care about this? I kind of forgot the sync rates was even an important thing about anything.
Again, this is one of those moments where it's like, this is either bad writing or it's supposed to be meta writing, where he's like, I'm purposely doing a cheesy anime thing. But no matter which of those answers, I think it's bad writing.
Yes.
There's some of the meta stuff here that I think is clever and works. But there's other times like this where it's just like, if this is meta and it's supposed to be like a response to this cheesy moment from regular anime, it sucks here. I don't watch this moment and I'm like, clever, he was meta. It's just like, no.
And I just feel like this isn't the time and place for it.
Absolutely.
Anymore. So like, if you want to do this in one of the other rebuilds or something, so you kind of build up the kind of joke about it, sure. But like, not right now. Not here.
On that note, I think it would have been much cooler if when he first gets into the Evangelion, for like a second, he's like, we're going to fight. And his dad's like, no, we're going to talk. And we would have just immediately rolled into that. But instead, we do go into this long fight sequence. And again, I kind of said, like, if tearing through the fabric of the production is interesting thematically, I like that stuff. But this fight overall, which is almost entirely CG, I did not like.
I very much like that Shinji finally confronts his dad.
Yes.
Not running away there. It's a very much straight up, I'm going to fight you. Thought that was really cool. It's something we hadn't really seen very much before. Like, he kind of stands up to him in the other ones, but not like to this scale of just like actually getting in the robot to fight his dad. I absolutely hate most of the animation of this fight.
Yeah, it looks yucky.
It looks like you hired the Ruby crew to fucking animate your goddamn movie, and I hate it.
Yes, yeah. That's a great example.
That type of animation is not to, if anybody uses animation, not to like knock you. That's what you use when you don't have a big enough budget to make something nice and pretty.
Right.
You have the budget to make one of the largest anime franchises ever, to make the final movie that you know is going to blow up the box office, because it did.
Yeah.
Why are you using this? It doesn't look good. It doesn't create fluid animation. It doesn't look realistic. Even if it does look realistic, I am watching an anime. If you want something to look real, you make a live action movie.
Right.
But you do animation to suspend people's belief and do what you can't do in real life.
Yeah.
Why are you doing this?
I mean, even again, it's not like I wanted this to be the same as in Eva. I made that point clear, but like once again, talking about the mass-produced Evas, that fight with Asuka in that in Eva where she's fighting them and she's running out of time. Yeah. The animation there, people always talk about it. It's amazing. Probably one of the best animated sequences maybe in any animated film. It's incredible. And then to get a scene like this, which should have the same kind of weight and importance.
Should be one of the most important fights in the whole series.
But to me, I was so distracted by how bad it looked that I couldn't appreciate a second of it.
I was completely flabbergasted the entire time. I kept saying, I was like, this is what you have finally do something like this, which is so important, and this is how you choose to do it.
I almost feel like this would have been a great moment to do the exact opposite because of the fact that so much of the fights that we just saw were CG and the fight at the beginning was CG. This would have been a great moment to return to form and be like, now that we're back to just Shinji and his dad, we're back to basics in terms of the animation too. And then it would have made it seem like the CG almost had a point to be like, here's the new flashy stuff of the new world and all this new technology. But when it comes back to basics, we cut back to basic. Almost like later on what they do with the hand-drawn
I would have
thing.
Preferred they even just done the black and white hand-drawn fight for this than what we got.
Right.
At least it would have been some kind of cool, like,
aesthetic
David Lynchian-esque.
It would have maybe had a thematic purpose as well. Whereas this, I don't think there's a thematic purpose. I don't think so.
If there is,
again, if it's one of those meta things, then
I don't get it.
Either A, it didn't come across, or B, if it did come across to some people, surely you still don't like it, right? Yeah. It looks bad.
I don't.
Yeah, I just wish, maybe back to what I was saying earlier, maybe it should have been the opposite instead of, because I said like Shinji wants to fight, but Gendo doesn't, which is kind of what happens here, is like Gendo's like, no, you've got to figure it out. You're not going to win by fighting. What would have been better in terms of...
Well, it's like Gendo says too, like, this is also not just fight for you. I also have to prove myself.
Right.
I also have to pass this
I think this would have been better if those roles were almost flipped in a way, because this movie is about Shinji growing up and learning this. And there's even a scene earlier where it's like, you should talk to your dad.
Yeah.
What should have happened is Gendo, it's a shorter scene, it doesn't look bad, and Gendo is like trying to attack Shinji, and Shinji's just like, I'm not going to fight you, Dad.
It's almost like at one point without saying it, Shinji's like, I'm the dad now. And they completely flip roles.
Right. But I think there would have been a better, more natural way to do that. That would have made more sense with.
You could still have Shinji be, more sure of himself, more, mature, and blah 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 blah, without having him and Gendo kind of take reverse roles in a weird way.
Yeah,
I don't get that.
So then we get into Gendo's mind here, essentially.
And I actually like some of these things.
I like some of this stuff quite a bit. Again, I
seeing Gendo finally
was a little too on the nose,
because Gendo's done it before in the other ones where we kind of get a little bit more him. But I feel like I kind of liked this like little bit more nuanced inside vision of like how he actually feels, how he sees himself, and be like, I am kind of just like you. I was just like you too, and I kind of seeing how similar we are. The thing which I don't know. Again, we should have rewatched this. So if they do this before, sorry, but I kind of like the reveal of like the recording thing is actually Gendo's the whole entire time.
Yeah, that was interesting.
It's like, actually, hey, this is yours. It's like, I should be returning. It's like, oh, that's so cool that this thing that Shinji just cherishes more than anything in the world was a gift from his dad. Right,
which makes a lot more sense, because the original I always viewed it as just his way to cut out reality, which partially it is. But it's also, now we know, it's his only connection. It's maybe his only positive thing he has of his father.
And also, from what we know, like, it sounds like there's audio recordings on it, which everybody's always speculated. But it sounds like, I think, at least maybe I misinterpreted wrong, it sounds like it's Gendo and the mom talking about naming Shinji.
I didn't catch that.
I think that's what's on there. So it's like him kind of like listening to his parents talk, and it's just like, there's only way to like hear his mom's voice again, but also here's dad talk about him in a positively manner.
Yeah.
So it's like the only thing he really cherishes.
Yeah, I like that stuff. I do want to say, I think this is a good time to note, even before this movie came out, we talked about recently, like we had a conversation about like, could somebody watch the rebuilds having not seen the original show? And to me, I think some of the stuff in this scene really cemented like, I guess you could, but I don't think you should.
So I kept this in mind while watching this. And I think, like you said, you could, but I think without realizing the changes and the steps characters that come from here, you could watch it and take it at face value, but you wouldn't appreciate
those moments. Yeah. Especially, I mean, that's the positive stuff we have said about this movie mostly revolves around how the characters have grown and changed from the original series, which is so fascinating to see. I guess potentially you could do this in reverse order, and that might be interesting.
Yeah.
To go from like seeing them hopeful to seeing them desolate. That could be interesting in its own right. But I think especially moments like this, like I know that the rebuilds did show the tape player. Maybe that one was driven home enough, but I feel like there's a lot of stuff in this movie that wasn't really driven home that much. Even just the character of Gendo, I felt like if you didn't know him so much from the original show, some of this revelations wouldn't be as interesting. No. It'd be like, right, this character,
it's not
why
is
he
like
such a big deal in the finale?
It's not like he learned so many things in this one, but just like in all of the things, you just learn so much more about Gendo in general. Like it totally opens up a whole new like perspective of Gendo that we haven't seen before.
Definitely.
Honestly, we get to see a new perspective of Shinji we've never seen before, because
that's true.
Shinji doesn't become like this kind of assured character until kind of like the very end when instrumentality is kind of taking place in a way. We don't get really to see that.
But even the stuff in the beginning of this movie, we were talking about how cool it is to see, even though there are characters that we weren't the biggest fans of, like characters like Toji and Kensuke, and even the class rep, it's like, seeing them again was like, oh, this is actually kind of nice. Even though I would have never said that I needed to see Kensuke again, actually seeing it is like, this is cool. And I felt like if you just watch the rebuilds, it would almost be like, why did they bring these fucking characters back? Who cares about these fucking guys?
Exactly.
But knowing how important they were to Shinji originally in the original series was, why it matters here and why that stuff worked here. So yeah, I think, and I've seen other people, this is one of the few things that I have seen people talk about online recently about this movie, is like, these do almost feel like they only work as sort of a meta commentary on the show itself. I suppose you could still watch these and appreciate them, but
just so much,
I don't know if you would just get much out of it.
So much of it, especially once they start doing like the instrumentality part, like so much of that is a comment to the whole entire franchise as a whole, and not specifically just these rebuilds.
Right.
They're so much more separated apart from that and the greater like theme of it. But yeah,
definitely. Anything else to say really about the stuff in Gendo's mind here? Again, we like this stuff for the most part.
Yeah,
there's a lot.
This part happens after.
Here.
Not that we have to explain every single plot point, but this point happens after they do Guys, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are. Yeah, again, it's we can't say everything. But yeah, there's a whole thing with the Lance of Longinus and the Spear of.
Because that kind of happens, and I remember when the moment they do that, so much thing had flashed before you, and so many things happened. It's like kind of forgot they did that.
Right.
So like that whole thing happens.
Yeah.
This is where we get Mari, where she goes in there and like her job is to pull
Shinji out,
which we don't even get explained how she knows how to do that.
Yeah, no clue. Again, that's what I'm talking about in terms of like all of this is too abstract for me.
Yes.
Whereas I like subtle abstract stuff, but it's just like, how is anybody doing this stuff? How are they moving around in this space? I get that in a way there is no space, but that makes it even more confusing of how you could find somebody in this.
Right.
And why is Mari able to? Because like we understand that she seems to have been one of the early pilots, maybe the original pilot, but does she have special abilities that other pilots
Maybe
don't?
She just theoretically understands in a way Gendo does how all of this works.
Maybe because she was more on the ground floor of that
because I think that's what makes Gendo so powerful is Gendo understands all of this. So, he's not so confused when things happen, like with the memory things. He's like, I know what this is.
Right.
So kind of like the thing of just like, if you know this all is in your head or imaginary, you can kind of like lucid dreaming. You can control everything.
Yeah.
So they kind of in a way she might have that sort of ability.
I do really like this scene at the end of Gendo's sequence where it ends very simply. He just gets off the train. Yep. And they're just like, yeah, we're moving past him now.
Yep.
I like that a lot. That's a small thing.
I kind of like the whole sequence of like what we're about to talk about with everybody. I think it's kind of nice.
Yeah, so this is another one of those things where it's again, I think if you hadn't, you might get enough out of these characters for the rebuilds, but I think some of this, because we're basically getting like the final wrap up of these characters.
I was gonna say that it's kind of like it's a goodbye to everybody.
Yes, basically. Goodbye all of Evangelion. Yeah, I mean this sequence really feels like that. This was mostly hit, but with some misses here. I didn't really love Karu's section.
The one thing I will say about Karu is I think changed my perspective how I view the rebuilds in general. As I still think this is more or less Otto saying yes, which was not expecting him to hold this answer so much to him. But Karu kind of was more or less one of the more important characters of the big theory of, is this what actually took place after the original series? Is saying it's a continuation, where like he kind of does confirm that.
Yeah, like the time loop theory seems to be
the time thing is true,
very real,
but in a more abstract meta way, and where Gendo felt like he was in a loop with Evangelion, and so this is him retelling stories over and over and over again. So if like it was confirming both yes, but also yes, but in a meta way. We're like, I'm writing Karu again, I'm writing these characters, and I have to keep writing these characters, keep doing the things over and over and over again.
Right. Like Shinji and Karu will always sort of be bound together in this way.
They even say that he's like, we're going to always find each other. Like, no matter what, we find each other.
Right. Which makes 3, I think, a little even more interesting because, like, out of 3, which basically is completely off the rails new stuff, the only real connection it has to the original is the relationship with him and Karu.
Yeah.
Everything else is just total, like, bonkers. We've never seen anything like this. So that is kind of the only thing that grounds it into the original thing, which is kind of interesting because it's like, now that we know that it is kind of the time loop, it's like there is certain things that are almost predetermined to happen. Even if a lot of the side events kind of change, it almost seems like there will always be certain things that are just consistent.
It kind of also, to me, felt like Kaoru was saying, this will happen again, we'll meet each other again. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it kind of feels like how Shinji did things. We also find out, like, no, it's not. Like, Shinji finally closed the loop.
Right.
And not that that was anybody's goal, but I think it both, like, happened kind of in a theme of the show, but also in a way.
I think that's one of those things people will be debating for a while. Is did he? Because in some ways, I do think it does lean towards that, but it certainly doesn't definitively say that. At least it didn't to me. I think, which I liked. Again, I like that it leaves kind of that door open of like, I mean, potentially there could be more Evangelion. I don't want any more. Yeah. But you potentially could.
I think as he goes through, like we'll talk about a little bit, like a few seconds, but as he goes through the characters, I feel like how Shinji addresses this is so much more different than how he addresses it like in Evangelion for a second. Where what he did there felt like he did for himself. Yes. He decided he didn't want to be separate, but what he's doing for himself. This was like Shinji was doing this for everybody else. Mm-hmm. He was no longer putting people in places that benefited him or what he wanted. He's putting people in places that was best suited for them without even thinking of himself and like how this would affect him. Right. You know, he's just trying to put everybody, lack of a better term, like their happy place. You know, he's trying to rewrite everything like that. I'm confused by, were they trying to say Kaoru was the leader of the rebellion organization?
That stuff I was confused
I'm confused by that. Yeah. Was that real or was that just like a weird vision thingy, like seeing people on the train? Train's not actually there. Was this just like, was this an actual flashback or nothing?
Yeah, I would lean towards that's not literal, but I didn't really completely understand it. Yeah, that's Kaoru's section. I know we're going out of order with how he meets the characters here.
I'm just glad they told us that oh my gosh, what's the guy's name he's with?
Kaji.
I'm glad they finally told us he like actually died in this one.
You know, it's so mysterious in the original. Like, did Kaji die?
He didn't tell us. This one just straight up tells us. I'm so. Yeah, you know, I like Kaoru a lot. I feel like the send off was. I mean, you guys see them on the beach again together, and it's saying goodbye. So you know, it was fine.
But that's one of those things where I'm a little bit torn because like some of those scenes, it was like, okay, sure, it's kind of nice to see this again, but it's almost like overly fan servicey. It's similar to how we again see Asuka and Shinji.
I really liked Asuka's. Yeah, I think Asuka, we got to see a bunch of character stuff we didn't. We kind of seen somewhat in the series, but not necessarily in the rebuilds quite. Mm-hmm. You know, like a lot of stuff, the flashbacks, the mom, and all the drama stuff like that. But I do kind of like the beach scene where that's one of those scenes where I know it's obviously fan servicey, but I think that's a general one where like in the end of Evangelion, that's like them kind of coming together, and that's what like it kind of makes you think like Shinji and Asuka want to be together, but at this point these characters are so different now. They've matured past that. It's just like it's them kind of separating each other.
That one worked for me because it's an interesting parallel, similar to how like with Ritsuko and Gendo, like that's basically a recreation of their scene where one of them shoots the other, but it's an interesting parallel of like seeing how different it is now. So some of that stuff works, but there were just a few moments in here that I felt like almost were just put in a little too much to be like, remember this?
Right. Big time.
Some of them were just, you know, you could argue like, well, it's meant to show the progression of the loop and all that. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't have a purpose, some of it, but a couple, it wasn't a huge thing, but there was a couple things I was like, this is a little fan servicey. Yeah, I think Asuka's was pretty good. Ray's was okay.
Yeah, it wasn't much to it.
I didn't feel as much as I wanted to.
Ray's was obviously just meta. It was the most meta one of it. Yeah. Like, you see kind of like the figures in a way, everything kind of like the model kit kind of looking kind of stuff everywhere. This one was very much being like, this was Anno saying through Ray, Evangelion, we're going to live in a world with no more Evangelions. Evangelion's done. We're through. It's over with. Yeah. Goodbye, Evangelion.
Definitely a meta scene. Obviously the part when like literally she says like, you know, we're gonna start over, and he's like Neon, or one of them says like Neon Genesis, and then literally like the original opening thing. Yeah, very very meta. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I have a lot more to say about any of this stuff. Before we talk about like the final scene here, is there anything we want to? We definitely skipped over some stuff. We joked about the Evangelion imaginary earlier. I don't even know anything to say about that.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means.
That's one of those things where like they told me. They explained it in the movie. I don't fucking know what they told me though.
Well, I also think not about the imaginary Evangelion. fucking care about that.
It just means nothing.
It means nothing. It means nothing. I was so confused by that in so many levels. I was like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me here. But I kind of think another thing that kind of helped, if this is solidifying the loop, is like Gendo and Shinji actually having an actual earnest, heartfelt moment together, realization, and then Gendo having the realization that like he shouldn't push himself away from Shinji to try and get back to Yuri, that Yuri was in Shinji the whole time.
Right.
So like instead of doing the whole like, yeah, she's still technically in Ava 01, it's kind of trying to say like she actually was really in Shinji the whole time, always a part of Shinji. So I kind of like that kind of culmination at the end where Yuri and Gendo sacrifice themselves so Shinji doesn't have to do that to make Instrumentality happen.
Right.
Which kind of felt like, oh cool, that kind of feels like Shinji's now getting to like then go live his life, which I think kind of leads into like what happens in the end.
Yeah, true.
Which I felt was kind of a nice little touch of like Gendo doing one last thing for his son, you know, an actual earnest move for once.
Is the imaginary Evangelion supposed to be some kind of meta thing of like, because obviously the show is fictional and like fans are seeking for more, the same way that they were like wanting to find the imaginary.
Yeah, you know what?
Is it supposed to be something like that?
That might be it. Hey, your fan theories are in your imagination.
Here's the thing: is like, is this stuff that is that meta and clever, or are we so desperate to find meaning in all this nonsense that we're just attributing things to it?
That could be. I gave Imaginary Evangelion no more thought than the moment it took to enter my head, and then I left it.
Right.
I was like, this thing means nothing. You just said 5 other things that also felt silly, so I'm just gonna pretend this is one of them.
I mean, I guess that's the problem. And that's one of the reasons why like I'll have to almost like see how I feel about this movie in a year. Is like in a film or something that does have a lot of meta or symbolic things, even if they are clever from a standpoint, if they don't work in the enjoyment of the film, I still question if they're necessary. You know, it's sort of like what I would call like the Last Jedi problem, where like for the most part I like the Last Jedi, I guess, but I have a lot of problems with it. But it's like there's a lot of stuff that on a meta, and I don't want to get off on a huge tangent here, but on like a meta perspective of like Star Wars as a whole, it's like, oh, that's a pretty clever twist or surprise of what you expect from the formula. But does that make it a good movie?
Right.
Just because you did something that like, you know, was different than what was done before. And I felt like that a lot of times in this movie where it's like, this is definitely different and unique, but is it good?
I just don't understand like those who can understand the perceive of reality, blah, 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 can only see imaginary. I mean, I was like, are you trying to say like people who get the meta stuff and like, I don't know. To me, I was just like,
that's what I'm saying. Even if it is some really clever thing you could write an entire essay about, does that mean it's good to be in the movie?
Sure,
like just because it has meaning doesn't mean it works.
The hidden meaning in the greater context of the show, like I don't get what that is.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like, is it there or not? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You're in the anti-universe and like, is this?
Which is again going back to End of Evangelion. I always felt like sure, there's a lot here that is ostensibly nonsense, but I felt like it worked not only for the plot but for the themes, for the symbolism, in a way that I felt like kind of wrapped all of that up so nicely. And with this, I felt like it went way too far in certain places, maybe in a couple areas not far enough, and it just didn't feel like it congealed the same way. It felt like it left me being like, what the fuck is happening? Whereas like End of Eva has that to an extent, but in a satisfying way.
Sure. This one's just kind of like you get the imaginary Eva, and then you get the scene where like Mari's like, I gotta get all the numbers that go up to 13 before we get there, because like all the missing numbers.
Goodbye, Evangelion 2 plus 7 plus 9. Like, what are you talking about?
It's like Gendo's like, I can't let people think, well, what happened to the other Evangelion numbers? I gotta show them. There also was other numbers. I did just skip a bunch of numbers.
Right.
It just felt so fucking silly.
It's just very excessive.
Yes.
Again, compared to the original where it was like pretty clear cut. Here's how many angels there are. Here's how many Evas there are. I even would have thought
it would have been kind of funny meta-y if she had say goodbye, Unit 1, goodbye, like the ones we know. Mm-hmm. But other than 2, it was just a flash of a bunch of Evangelions we saw 3 seconds ago.
Yeah.
I'm just like, who's this for?
Right, which I mean, it was sort of a thing already when we were in 3, where it was like they had Unit 13. It was like, oh boy, we skipped ahead here.
Yeah.
Which made sense for a huge time jump.
It's like Anno,
but the fact that they tried to fill that in this lame way.
Went to like the internet and read all of the weird theory crafting complaints anybody ever had. And was like, I'm going to excruciatingly explain every single one of these in the dumbest way possible, so that no one's happy with what just happened.
Yeah, I mean, in a way, it almost felt like how again, comparing this to like a more cheesier anime, and again, we like Dragon Ball quite a bit, but like for years people were like, oh, what if there's like a Super Saiyan 5 or whatever?
Yes.
And then when they brought Dragon Ball back for like Super, they were like, well, now there's a Super Saiyan God, and don't worry, there's a Super Saiyan God. Yeah. And it almost felt like you just like caved to the lame fans on the internet.
Yes.
And I'm not saying this movie was that egregious.
It almost makes me wonder though if like
little aspects of that.
Is this caving, or is this them laughing to the bank of just like, I can't believe you like this.
Right.
Like I can't believe I did this dumb thing called Super Saiyan God, and you guys like, oh hell yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that documentary will. Maybe the documentary is just Anno being like, I'm just making something to fuck with everybody. How can I fuck with all of the vast differences of fans? Like, there's going to be at least one thing in this movie that will get somebody.
Yep.
They'll be like, what the fuck?
So now the end.
Let's go and get the. There's a lot of things we could go on forever about, but I want to get this done. We've been going for a long time here, so let's get to the ending here. I don't like that it ends with Mari, just because I don't understand the purpose of her character. I feel like that was
so on purpose.
Yeah, I suppose
because
so.
we see Asuka.
Right, we see them all.
Done. Rey. Done.
Yeah.
I feel like those are the big fan favorite things like that. So this is like Anno kind of like, he ends up with none of them. In fact, I'm going to make him into a Mari, the character you guys all fucking hate.
Right. But even still, this, I don't know, maybe that's, again, intentional. But this could have been a nice moment to like have them have a nice interaction, but even still,
I kept waiting for something with everybody to be together. Kind of like almost
not even that, but even if it's just these two characters, have their meeting work,
not be creepy,
not be weird. Like first he's like, oh, the girl with big boobs. And, like they're talking about how she's still.
I get it was a callback joke, but not to a good one.
No, to a terrible one, to a creepy one, and then like. Yeah,
it's like even if it was together, even if they were like together, not saying they were, even if they were together, if that's like their cutesy little interaction thing between each other, it's like that's gross.
Yeah. Imagine like being friends with the couple in real life that like every time like the girlfriend would come over.
Oh look, it's the girl with the big boobs, my wife.
And then she was like, you know, like leaning in and being like, "Come here, little doggy." Like I'd be like, "You guys are the grossest couple.
You're never coming over ever again." I think I don't know if it's meant to be taken as that's what's happening, or because we don't see any of the other characters and we see
see them on the station.
Yeah, I guess that's true, but like they're slightly different though, aren't they?
Well, some of them because the curse is broken, so yeah, they're like aged up.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying like these felt normal, but Shinji and Mari looked different. Maybe I didn't get enough look. I just felt like they looked like normal.
Well, that's because they're like adult versions.
No, I'm saying like Asuka and Kaoru to me looked the same.
Oh, I see.
But Shinji and Mari looked different.
Oh, so I guess I don't know. I guess I didn't get a good enough look at the other ones.
So I didn't know if it was like just trying to be like versions. I know if I took this like Shinji like remembering them and they weren't actually there.
Maybe.
But also we see like a whole built city again. So I didn't know if this was supposed to be like what Shinji did worked, but now Shinji and Mari are stuck in a different reality storyline than everybody else is, and that's why they're together.
Yeah, it's
because there's no way for them to go back
to, because he still has the choker on for one thing.
Yeah,
suggesting that like this is the exact same Shinji that we saw go through all this stuff at the end of the movie, rather than like a new universe or something. Because why would this other universe Shinji have the choker on, even if he somehow had the same memories? So it does sort of seem to imply that like somehow they hit
did his mentality, but he like got out right in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I don't know if we're supposed to necessarily have a clear, defined answer for that, but which I don't mind necessarily.
Yeah, that's fine.
That being said, I don't think I liked that it's a live action city and they're running through.
Dude, I couldn't tell for so long.
Yeah,
I kept looking at it like, okay, I know this part's animated, and then it got to like the thing is like, is this a real city? Like it just was like really messing with my brain.
So this is one I still want to think about a little bit more. So I found out one of the few things I did see online is that apparently this is Anno's hometown.
Okay.
Which I feel like is also must be some kind of a meta thing of like his characters are sort of free now in his hometown. Like maybe he doesn't feel constrained by them now. He can just they can go and be free in the real world. Like they're out of his hands now, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's like he's done with Evangelion, so now it's out and he doesn't have to do anything with it. I think is
because like it isn't like Mari said like you ready, let's go. Like kind of like is like we're gone.
Yeah, and like they're even like kind of just run off into the city. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have as much. I think some of that meta stuff's there. I don't have as much to say about this ending as I maybe would have liked to. Also, though I liked the song here, I didn't like it being here. Like The pop song was a fine song. I didn't mind the song. It felt like overly cheesy.
There's a lot of like the music choices. There's some of them I really liked.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting that this one had more. I guess they've always had like some of them have always had like vocals in there. This one like had a lot of vocals, but also in English, which I was like kind of surprised by. I'm assuming it was the same way for the sub. I doubt they'd recorded
a little while since I watched the rebuilds. I want to say there was a couple moments like this in the rebuilds where I had like similar kind of odd music choices, or at least odd in terms of. Were they like
English version songs though?
I don't remember.
I feel like I just don't remember seeing English in here before.
Maybe there was a little bit. I mean, obviously, Come Sister Todd in the original End of Evangelion is English.
Yeah.
Even though the title isn't.
But it is like a Japanese person singing.
Yes.
The English version of that. This felt like it's actually like English people singing.
Right.
Which I thought was weird.
But this movie also tries to have, because even though it is very different, a lot of this does feel very similar to End of Evangelion. Like even though it's not called Third Impact, it's additional, whatever. There are definitely similar. There's some shots that are like exact recreation of shots, which again I suppose is somewhat intentional for the time loop.
Yeah.
Some of that I'm like maybe that's bad fan servicey thing, but they try to do a somewhat similar moment to the Come Sister Todd thing. I hope I'm even saying that name of that song right. I think people know what I mean. But it never hit that high for me.
Right.
Because like that sequence, again, we talked about the mass-produced Ava things, which is a gorgeously animated
sequence. That sequence is amazing.
But that entire, like sometimes that's one of the things that like, sometimes I'll just go on YouTube and just watch just that Come Sister Todd, the musical montage from that film, because it's so incredible and so visionary and cool. And I felt like when they got to the quote-unquote similar moment here, it just did not hit me. And again, I'm not saying I wanted them to do the same thing, but it's almost weird that they kind of, in a way, did do the same thing, but like a worse version of it.
Sure.
It's like, well, then don't do it at all. Do something totally different. I'd be way more interested in that. But the fact that you purposely gave me a moment that was definitely meant to feel like a loose recreation of that original, but you made a worse version of it.
Right.
You know, not that it was terrible. It wasn't. But just like when you compared to one of the best sequences you've ever had in your entire franchise. Maybe
I don't
the best
know if.
one.
I mean, because to be fair, when I first started watching Evangelion, the rebuilds were already occurring.
Right.
So I don't know if the difference for me is feeling more satisfied with this ending is because it felt like it end capped it in an appropriate manner. Like this feels like, oh, we get to see Shinji after what happens after Inspiration. Sure. We're done. This is over. Or if because I know there's nothing else coming out, it felt like, okay, I don't have to look forward to anything anymore.
Right.
So I'm not like entirely sure which one of those is. But I feel like I feel like I don't know. This isn't to say there's no criticisms of it at all, because it obviously is. I just don't know what else I would have done differently. Not necessarily how they shot the sequences, obviously could have been different. Yeah. But an overall general like theme, ending, sequences, like what I would have really done that wouldn't have felt either fan servicey or like done anything entirely different.
I guess, yeah, I mean, I don't have like a specific thing that I would have wanted, but I guess something more, like, I still could have definitely had the same themes of growth and maturation, but
personally, and this might have been just too fan servicey, maybe too much of a bow, putting a ribbon on it ending, but I kind of personally would have liked to have seen them as grown-ups again, like have them aging, but they're back all in the village, kind of living there. That might have been too much of a nice bow to put on the end of it, but to me, it's kind of liking to have seen everybody back together again at the end. Everybody's actually kind of living. It does seem like more or less Shinji and Mario have that ending, but like, well, I like to see it for Shinji. Don't know if I really cared enough about Mari to be like, oh, good, Mari got a good ending. It's like the character
we even talked about how like one thing that's cool about this is that it feels like Shinji's not just selfishly doing this for him. So then it would have been a better reflection if it is all of them in the village and he sees that he's done it for everyone.
Exactly.
But when it only focuses on him and Mari, a character that even if you do really like the character, still makes it seem like the scope is very small. I mean, granted, we do see that shot of the other people.
And that's what made me wonder if like this was like Shinji didn't get to be in the same world as all of them, and that's where like the selfishness comes in. Like he's stuck in this thing with Mari,
right?
And like he's not getting to be with everybody else in their own timeline, kind of thing. And that's like the sacrifice he had to give to have this whole thing happen. If that's what they're trying to say, if that's what they're trying to say, that makes more sense to me.
Yeah,
that this kind of ended it. But if not, then I am kind of confused. Like, I don't know, is this like he's that much years older now and they rebuilt an entire city? Like, I'm just kind of confused by exactly where we're supposed to be at in that universe at that point.
But I think for me, in terms of what I would have wanted is because I love the beginning so much. obviously at some point even though I would have been fine, honestly, probably with the whole movie focusing around that, at some point we did have to get back to the major story.
Yeah.
But I think my problem, that's kind of one of my problems arise. And I think for me, if even if we did get back to the main story, if we weren't so purposely recreating some of the original stuff.
Right.
Because that's what I like about 3 is that they're finally like, okay, we kind of were on track with just rebooting this, and we've slowly diverged, and now we're just totally in a different universe. Again, I know from a meta contextual standpoint, it makes sense to recreate some of those scenes and also show the character growth. But I probably would have preferred if they had done those similar themes and symbolism with a story that felt totally 100% different from End of Eva.
Sure.
And the fact that it calls back to it so much, while I understand has meta significance, I would have preferred some of those callbacks to be in a totally new setting.
Yeah.
You know, like...
I didn't dislike some of the meta callback, but I do agree where it would have been nicer if we got more of a actual story.
Like, we could have still had the moment of Ritsuko shooting Gendo in a totally different environment. We could have still had, some of the stuff internally with Gendo's head in a totally different environment. We could have got that stuff, but without having to feel so specifically like we were revisiting.
Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff at that point is purely referencing the franchise in total, and not necessarily the story we were just being told through the last previous movies.
Right. Which in some ways is fine, especially if we're talking about how like this is meant to be, more of a thing you watch alongside the original rather than a standalone thing. Yeah. But I don't know if that is the call I would have preferred or not.
I think I would have preferred we flash to Shinji being an old man. He's just telling his grandkids, and that's how I saved the world. I'm like, just go do that. And that's how I met your mother.
I also feel like again, it's not that I want them to recreate these exact same things. I just would have liked similar things that were new and different. One thing I liked about some of the original stuff is, I know people complain about episodes in 25 and 26, but I loved how, like, whether the budget ran out or not, I love how fucking ballsy they are. Mm-hmm. And I also love in, like, End of Evangelion, there's a lot of ballsy stuff too, of like halfway through the movie the fucking credits play.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the movie, because the credits already played, it just cuts to black. I don't want that specific to happen again, but I will have loved to see some stuff like that was as fresh and bold.
Sure.
To where you saw it and you're like, holy shit.
It is interesting because I feel like based off what expectations they threw us for at the end of 2, and then where we get at 3, mm-hmm. and how vastly different tonally and everything that thing is, I do think it's surprising how we got from there to here.
Kind of back on the rails in a way.
In a way. Yeah. I think the only kind of bold thing they did in a different, interesting way was the beginning part
mm-hmm.
of how they're showing that was something. It wasn't exactly like risk taking, but it was kind of cool. It was a nice thing to see.
Something unlike we'd seen
because
ever
again,
in the show.
it was taking what tone you gave us and doing a completely different tone.
Yeah.
Completely again.
But that worked. It didn't feel like a betrayal of the previous stuff.
Like, I kind of like some of the story part of the telling up to that point, but then it is, once we start getting to the anti-universe, like, it's almost like that other movie we're watching is done, and we're watching an entirely different thing.
Yeah, exactly.
In a way. Yeah.
That didn't connect for me. Those two pieces don't feel like...
Well, I like the send-off. It just didn't feel like an ending to the series. It felt like an ending to the franchise, mm-hmm. not an ending necessarily to the rebuilds we were watching.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think I have much else to say about it. We talked about it a lot. That was almost 2 hours.
Hell yeah.
We're getting close to the 2 hour mark here. So
we're going to be as long as the movie almost.
People always used to really complain about that when we would, not everybody, a lot of people liked our original podcast, and thank you if you did and you're listening. Also, if you did listen to our original podcast, shout out in the comments. We'd love to hear from you guys again.
Also, if this seems too long for you, just go to your settings and YouTube and just do like times 1.5 and there you go. Right.
That's another reason I want to put the chapters in here, so hopefully people could kind of jump around a little bit if they didn't want to hear everything. But I understand we're meandery a lot. But I mean, that's, how do you talk about this movie in any other way?
It is hard not to like talk about some parts without referencing other parts and just going back and forth. It's kind of difficult.
Yeah,
unless you wanted us to go like scene by scene by scene, which just would have been forever.
That would have been super, super long. And also, if people are thinking it's too long now, imagine if we'd done that. But also, I think since so much of this is based around the themes in the meta text, you have to jump around because those conversations don't make sense if you don't kind of do that.
Exactly.
But yeah, thanks anybody for listening. I don't know, our original podcast always did pretty good. I don't know how many people are going to check this out, but if you did, thank you so much. And like I said, if you were a listener to the original or if you want to sound off in the comments, I would like to hear, as long as you're not just a total dick, even if you, like, I'm totally fine with you being like, wow, you guys were totally wrong about all this stuff.
Yeah,
that's
no
fair. Because, we were.
Yeah.
Just don't be a total asshole. Don't be like, you guys should go kill yourselves. Otherwise, we'll have to make a whole rebuild series just trashing you. But yeah, I would even like to kind of be active in the comments on this. So, because there's a lot that's open up to interpretation here, and like we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. But one thing that was so interesting to me about the original podcast that we did was seeing how people appreciated the show in so many different ways. Yeah, like the people that were in it just for the insane lore, I was like, wow, I didn't even know that there were fans like this, because that's just not what appeals to me. But it was interesting to like hear their perspectives.
Well, I think this series is like so meaningful to some people, especially as years of like spent so many years with the other one, just growing up and like meeting new people. I'm always surprised at the amount of people who like love this show. Like people I would never like. I don't even think they like anime, but like they remember watching the show back in Toonami, or people love it. And it's like it's a very beloved series for like multitude of reasons, which is really cool. I feel like you can't say that for a lot of shows.
Well, especially shows that rebuilds aside, even just talking about the original shows that are they kind of deny giving what the audience wants. Yeah. I guess it's similar in some ways, like how a lot of people do like Twin Peaks, even though that show just doesn't ever want to give you what you wanted. Exactly. It's fascinating to me because I always expect shows like this to be the kind of shows that, and granted, there are some people like this, that the people are more like, yeah, fuck that. Yeah. And I do know some people like that with Evangelion. I certainly even have a couple of friends that are like, yeah, Shinji's a little bitch and I don't want to watch it because he's lame. Yeah. And it's like, oh, that's a bummer, because if you'd watched it, you'd appreciate it more, I think, by the end. But like, yeah. I guess that's another thing too, is like, did anybody listening, did you have that reaction when you first started Evangelion? Because I was I think just because they've been recommended so hardly or so strongly to me, and I knew it was a short show, I didn't really have any hesitancy. I was like, oh, I'm in for the whole ride.
Honestly, I mean, people always say that, and like I get he's whiny, but I feel like that just comes from a certain understanding of narrative. Like you have to understand the intent behind the content, but that's the point. But
I guess if you were somebody who was just back in the day on Toonami or whatever, and an episode of this popped on after Gundam or Dragon Ball, I could see somebody being like, the fuck is this show? Yeah. Especially
that's true. I mean, like, because I didn't catch this when I don't know how I missed this on Toonami, because I lived on Toonami. Probably during when I was like doing sports or something stupid, so I didn't watch Toonami as much. Yeah. But like, I can imagine like me watching Gundam and then like I want to watch more mech, because I was super into mech.
Yeah, there's a kid crying.
There's barely any
I won't get in the robot.
The first couple episodes there's some like, my dad was like, where the fucking, I want some mech fights. What's this shit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for listening. This is posted on this Wet Rats channel, which we don't use anymore. Mostly just because I don't know where else to post it. And technically all of our other podcasts is on here too. And since I can't post it on any of the podcast services, it's going to live here. But if you did like it, thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody who used to listen to our show knows that we don't know how to end anything.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Send this to Hidekiano. I'd love to hear his feedback.
I'd like to hear his feedback. Yes, I'm gonna translate this and give it to him.
No, just give it to him like this.
See what he thinks. What do you think about it so far?
But yeah, I was gonna say, this is on this channel, but don't take this as a sign that we're gonna be posting here again. We felt like we had to do this, and I wanted to do this too. We're not gonna be like making more stuff on here. Probably not. I don't know. Who knows? I just don't want to guarantee anything, because there's always ideas kicking around in the can, but do not get your hopes up, everybody.
Maybe if enough people want us to do some more Evangelion stuff, we can think of some stuff. We'll see.
Yeah, I thought about doing other stuff before. Even when we finished up the podcast before, we talked about maybe doing smaller videos on certain subjects. Yeah. And then when the Netflix thing came out and it had differences in some of the dialogue, I was like, I could make a quick little video about like that, but I was like, nah.
Let's do a whole episode about sub versus dub.
Oh boy. Honestly, I'm not making any promises at all, but if we get enough interesting feedback and we feel like we learn a lot more of like what some of these terms we're dunking on actually kind of mean and how they might be important, it might be interesting to do a much shorter, not a 2-hour thing, but maybe a 20-minute thing. So I guess if you want that, comment and tell us to do it.
Yeah, sure.
But otherwise, that's probably it for us.
Much like the ending of Evangelion, this is the end of us.
Yep. Goodbye, all of the wet rats.
Congratulations.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.